Hi, I'm Simon Freethy, Managing Director of Cyrus, and welcome to our virtual Vinyl Day broadcast. I'm going to be your host today, ably assisted by David Patching, that's Cyrus's Marketing Director. He's driving the technical side of the broadcast today from behind the camera, so he's Marketing Director in the week and Recording Engineer at weekends, but you will see him pop up occasionally in the broadcast. As you'd expect, we are both in our homes, some kind of 70 miles apart, so fingers crossed that all of the technology holds up. So today was going to be Record Store Day, and like you, we are very disappointed that it has been postponed, because traditionally we run quite a number of events with our dealers, and so to help fill that void, we decided to put together this broadcast. We hope it'll go some way to help you out there get your vinyl fix and entertain those of you who are stuck inside on what looks to me like a pretty dreary Saturday morning. The driving theme of this is very much community. So we've got guests and contributors from all over the hi-fi world sharing their passion for and their experiences of the whole vinyl process, right from recording studio via the turntable through to the systems that you have at home. Now, apologies in advance for any substandard audio quality. We are using a mix of different video conferencing solutions, some of which will work better than others. Plus, I am sure there are going to be some bandwidth issues in some of the guest locations, but hopefully the quality of the content will shine through and enable you to see past any broadcast quality issues. So in case of fire, there are exits here, here, here. No, what I meant to say is that if there is a technical meltdown, which there may be because we are just using laptops here, we've not got any studio equipment or anything, then please bear with us. We'll get everything back up and running as soon as possible. So here's Patch to tell you with what's coming up a bit later on today.
Celebrate audio and vinyl in particular, and we're joined with some brilliant colleagues from around the industry. Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. My goodness, we watch some strange things when we're in isolation. But the good news is, for the next couple of hours, we've got you covered. We're here to celebrate audio and vinyl in particular, and we're joined with some brilliant colleagues from around the industry and of course with you. Now, first up today we have David Barron, a New York record producer and himself a prolific musician and composer. Then after that we're joined by a personal friend of mine, Conrad Mass, to talk about some high-end turntables. He's the founder and owner of Avid Hi-Fi. Just before lunch, we have our own Cyrus team talking about one of our special products, the Phono Signature, and as part of that, we're joined by Martin Flood, the chief engineer on the project, for a Q&A session. Just after noon, we're joined by Peter Thomas, founder of PMC Loudspeakers, and then later on this afternoon, last but certainly not least, we're joined by David Price talking through some of his vinyl highlights. As well as all of those great guests, we've got competitions, we've got promotions, and we've got a ton of great guests talking about their favourite vinyl and why it's important to them. Oh, hang on, no, I gotta go. Carol Baskin's on her way.
So apparently there's a very current cultural reference in that clip, but I have to say it was completely over my head. Now, as well as doing our thing today, the people behind Record Store Day are running a campaign using the hashtag #RSDFillTheGap. And what they're asking people to do is to support their local record store by pledging to buy something missing from their record collection and then go and buy it when the stores reopen. So to help inspire you to support them, throughout this broadcast today, we're featuring a number of short videos from the good and the great of the hi-fi and recording world, talking passionately about their favourite albums. So if some of their suggestions strike a chord with you, go out, pledge to buy it from your local record store and broadcast it out on social media with that hashtag RSD Fill the Gap tagline. At the end of the broadcast, we will be posting a complete list of all the choices and recommendations on our Facebook page. So here are the first couple. They're from Bob Surgener, who is the founder of the speaker brand Neat Acoustics, and our very own David Patching.
Wife Kathleen Brennan. Now, Hello, I'm Bob Surgener of Neat Acoustics, and I'd like to tell you about my album choice for Virtual Record Store Day. It's a Tom Waits album, and it's very difficult for me as a massive fan of Tom Waits to choose a single album, but I've come to the conclusion that it has to be this one. It's Mule Variations. This was recorded and released in 1999, and most of the songs are co-written with his wife Kathleen Brennan. Now, I will admit that Tom Waits' voice is an acquired taste. You could probably best describe it as an amalgam of Louis Armstrong, Captain Beefheart, Howlin' Wolf, and Beelzebub. Now, if you don't mind that, you'll be richly rewarded by the variety and quality of the songs on offer on this album. It has some amazing musicians, people like John Hammond, Charlie Musselwhite, Larry Taylor on bass, Mark Rebo on guitar, and a host of other amazing performers. But really, it's the richness and emotional quality of the songs that brings it home. The title of the album is basically Mule Variations. It's in the Waits household. Tom Waits is known to his wife and children as the Mule, and hence the title of the album. There's a massive diversity of styles, ranging from subversive proto-punk to sound pictures to hollering out and out rhythm and blues and the most poignant, beautiful ballads you could possibly hear. So if you can get past the voice, I heartily recommend it. Mule Variations.
Hi, I'm David Patching from Cyrus, and I'd like to share with you my choice for Virtual Record Store Day. So I'm a child of the 1980s. Growing up, synth pop was everywhere. And to my mind, the high watermark of synth pop was this album, Upstairs at Eric's by Yazoo. This was their debut album, released in 1982. And it features Vince Clarke, who later went on to become half of Erasure, and of course, Alison Moyet. I'm sure you all know, but Alison Moyet is one of those rare talents that comes along once in a generation. She has the ability to live life right on the edge. In her vocals, you can hear the little breaks as she's screaming out the lyrics, and yet she manages to keep full control all the way through and produce something that is just amazingly tuneful and yet so much energy and power. If you haven't heard this for a while, or maybe you haven't heard it at all before, then this is an absolute recommend from me. Upstairs at Eric's by Yazoo. Thank you.
So I hope you enjoyed those recommendations. And today we are also launching a competition where you can win a Cyrus One cast, which we're running throughout the whole of April. And David's going to be along in a moment to tell you a bit more about those. But I'm also going to run a shameless plug now and mention that Cyrus are running a special promotion that if you buy our Cyrus Phono Signature, you can get a PSXR2 external power supply at half price. We know that many retailers are shut at the moment, but if you're interested in this, you can email us and we'll put you in touch with someone who can help you out. The email address should be running across the bottom of the screen now, and that and the competition entry details will be periodically appearing across the bottom of the screen. So a bit more about the competition now. David's going to talk you through how that works.
We're in Vegas, baby. Everyone loves to win big, and we're giving you the chance to win a Cyrus OneCast smart amplifier, with built-in phono stage, of course. Now, throughout this stream, you'll be seeing videos from our colleagues in the music and audio industry talking about the albums that are important to them and why. And we'd like to invite you to do exactly the same. Simply record your video at home using your phone and then upload to our Facebook page. We'll be sharing some that we like and posting on our Facebook and YouTube channels, and on April the 30th we'll select an overall winner who will receive a Cyrus OneCast. So if you find yourself with a little bit of time on your hands and you want to share your passion with us and with your friends, then why not get recording? Best of luck.
Introducing the OneCast from Cyrus Audio, the world's first high-quality smart amplifier, perfectly integrated with your music streaming apps and voice assistants. For over 30 years, Cyrus Audio has been widely recognised as a market leader in sound quality. The all-new OneCast offers the amazing listening experience you'd expect from Cyrus Audio, coupled with the convenience of your existing services. Listen to your favourite music, radio and podcasts in any room or several at once with multi-room support. The all-new OneCast from Cyrus Audio. Smart music amplified.
Hey guys, here we are in the Big Apple, home to some of the biggest and best recording studios in the world. But music is an international language, something we can all enjoy and share, regardless of our country of origin. It has the power to bring us together for concerts, for hi-fi shows, even for live streams such as this one. Now, our first guest today is David Barron. David Barron is himself a composer, but also a music producer, and he's worked with the likes of Lenny Kravitz, Shawn Mendes, Jay Bird, just to name but a few. And he's here today with Simon Freethy to share his passion and love for music and the recording industry.
So now I'm joined by David Barron live from New York. Hi, David.
How you doing? I'm actually in Woodstock, New York, but
Woodstock,
similar.
New York. Okay. Yeah. Well, now David's a well-known record producer and composer in his own right. And the point of getting you on today, David, was to really kind of help us get a feel for the start of the whole musical journey. But maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit to everyone so they get a bit of a feel for who you are.
Oh, okay, no problem. I am primarily a record producer, and I produced a lot of artists like Jade Bird, who's from the UK, and I work with the Lumineers, I work with Lenny Kravitz, I've worked as an arranger, orchestral arranger for Shawn Mendes, did Meghan Trainor's All About That Bass, worked on a large variety of records, including the Mercury-nominated Bat for Lashes record, The Bride. So I've done a lot. Yeah, great, thank you so much. And a lot of it was done in this room, believe it or not. And I do that, and I'm also an artist of my own right. I release my own music, and I do a fair amount of scoring as well.
Okay, cool. So, where did your sort of love of vinyl and records come from? You know, because I understand you're particularly passionate about the vinyl form.
I am. You know, I grew up in the music industry. My dad was a recording engineer. First a technician in recording studios in New York City. And then in the mid 60s to late 60s, he had this crazy idea to put together a remote recording truck, which he did with a partner, Larry Dahlstrom. And they put together a truck called Location Recorders, which I think was birthed in 1968. And it had two 16-track recorders on it, which very new technology, a little console with 16 channels, which is also extraordinarily large for the time. And they would drive around and record live events, live concerts, and make records. So my dad did that before I was born, and then obviously I grew up with that, and I grew up around him, and he sort of taught me how to love. We had a reel-to-reel player in in our house with a fancy Macintosh stereo. I guess that was the fanciest thing you could get back in those days.
Yeah.
And he would play the recordings he did of concerts, the raw recordings, before they got mastered, before they were out on records, and you would hear the visceral excitement of live performance.
Yeah.
And in a way that, master tape is incredible. I mean, like your first generation tape, probably the closest thing that you're going to get to that experience today is going to be on vinyl. Digital does so much manipulation to get it to be ones and zeros and to get it to be computer code that there's some soul or spirit to audio that seems to get lost in the numbers. Now it's getting so much better than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling at some point I'm going to be like, all right, digital wins, but it hasn't won yet.
Okay. So your dad, he was a pioneer of the sort of live album recording.
That's correct. He started out as a technician, a studio tech and a repair guy at Fine Recording under Bob Fine. And Bob Fine was a very famous recording engineer who did a lot of very famous classical records. Then he moved over to A&R and worked for Phil Ramone, who trained him to be a recording engineer. And that's what got him in his passion of he loved the live music experience.
Yeah.
Like my dad loved, when he first started out at Fine, the typical session was 3-track. So it was sometimes mono, sometimes it was stereo, sometimes it was, I think he was right on the verge of stereo. So a live band would play, Sinatra would be singing, and it would be the live band, and that would be it. It'd be that experience, mix it to tape, and that's how we grew up.
Yeah. So you worked for him, I understand, when you were a teenager.
I did. I worked for my dad for many, many years and did a lot of stuff. I mean, from the time I could carry equipment to through college, and actually even after college, I worked with my dad.
One of the most memorable artists that you worked with kind of during that period? What are the stories that you would recount?
Well, when I was a kid, there's quite a few actually, but probably the biggest thing that I remember is I was very young and my dad was recording Stevie Wonder.
Wow.
And he took me to Manhattan with him. My dad took me everywhere. I was very lucky. And we went to SIR Studios, and Stevie Wonder was rehearsing with his band. And I sat there and I watched, I guess, a 3-hour rehearsal as, a 10-year-old.
Right.
And I learned so much in that 1-hour period. I mean, I thought at first I was like, God, he's so mean. And my dad's like, he's not mean at all. He's got to rehearse the band. He's got to get them to do what he needs them to do. And then by the end, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be in the music business.
And so that was your turning moment that made you want to follow this career.
It was one of them. And I think I was already going in that direction, but I think just watching it all come together, like after an hour, it sounded terrible and he was yelling and it was crazy. And then it started to sound better. And then it started to sound amazing. And I watched that whole process. And, Stevie Wonder's a genius, of course. So it was, my dad let me in on a lot of things like that, which was sort of like behind the scenes rehearsals. And those are the things I remember more than the shows.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Excellent. Now, obviously, you're now a record producer in your own right, working with a number of famous artists. And I guess what I really wanted to ask you was, the start of the creation of a fantastic record, a fantastic piece of vinyl is the artist, he's got a bunch of songs, he comes into the studio, and all of us hi-fi enthusiasts, we really understand and know that a good piece of hi-fi can really communicate the passion and the recording and the music, but the passion's got to be in the recording first before we even get to that process. So how do you ensure that happens? What goes on in the studio to make that work?
Well, I look at it this way. A lot of artists come to Woodstock, and actually I'm in Boise, right outside of Woodstock. They come to my mountain house, they come to this studio or a studio nearby that we work at, and they're mesmerized first by the natural beauty, by usually being away from their regular environments. They're usually very excited. It's like the ultimate vacation for a lot of artists.
Okay, so location of the studio is pretty key in that whole process then.
Absolutely. The way that people feel. I mean, everything from how you feel when you get up in the morning to the food you eat to the people that are around you, everything is important in terms of record making. I would say to keep people inspired is probably the key job of a good record producer, because you want them to sound like it's all new, it's all fresh, and it's magical, and it's the best them that has ever been.
Yeah.
So some of that is psychological. Some of it is simple things like good coffee and all of that silly stuff, but it actually adds up. And then the ultimate is having a good studio, good monitoring, and having just the best instruments and a wonderful Steinway or whatever it is that gets them to be exciting. Sometimes that is literally what we do. We try to make it feel new. The other side of the coin is like you said, everybody's got a bunch of songs. Everyone says, okay, I've got 10 songs. Here they are. Here's the ones that'll make it the record. We usually rehearse them in the room or upstairs on the deck outside. And then we record very quickly. We don't spend a lot of time. We'll arrange it and we'll spend a lot of time afterwards. But the actual process of getting the song down is like, what do we need? What are we going to do? It's all excitement. And that way you keep people in the moment, you keep it moving. And I think for me, I'm trying to recreate the things that I loved as a kid.
Yeah.
You know, those live concert experiences, Watch TV, Wonder Come Together, and when you're trying to create it for artists, you realize you get much better performance. I mean, it's crazy sometimes the performances that are the best are these really random late at night, hey, let's try a song. And an hour later you have the song.
Yeah. Wow. So it must be a bit like being one of these sort of Premier League football managers where you've got a bunch of really, really talented people, and some days they're rubbish and other days you can get them to perform really, really, really well.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's actually something that my dad taught me a long time ago. He was telling me a story about back to Sinatra, not that he worked with Sinatra a lot, but he was telling me Sinatra walked in the studio, there's a big band set up, they start playing, he starts singing, about halfway through the song, he's like, yeah, no, not today. And he walks out. Now, he's Sinatra, and I haven't ever seen anybody else do that, but some days it's not the right days to record a song. You just do something else. And some days, some songs are not ready to be on a record yet. I mean, was it the Rolling Stones that had Start Me Up and they tried to put it on 5 different records until they finally figured out how to arrange it? You know, there's a time for things.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And are you recording, presumably you're recording everything digitally now, or are you still using analog tape?
I have I record everything digitally to Pro Tools, and I have a Nagra 4S, which is a little portable analog tape machine. I use that more as an effect. Sometimes I'll record analog tape, like a piano track to analog tape, or sometimes but everything goes to digital just because of the amount of control that we need with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've recorded a lot on analog too, and in the end, digital's gotten so good.
Yeah, because the technology has improved a lot in the last, 5 years, 10 years? Where's the big progress been for you?
Well, I'd say in 10 years, it's gotten much better. The plugins, which is what we use to process the sound, have gotten much better even in the past 2 years. I think the last step is our converters are getting better now. And it gets a little bit more technical, but you know, the way that we're taking our analog information and turning it into computer signal, that seems to keep getting better and better. And obviously, I think it could still improve, because I record to the Nagra, I'll record a piano performance, and this is, you know, a tape machine that was designed, and mic preamps that was designed in 1971, and I still find it sounds better than recording directly to Pro Tools, which is it's something about it I really like. Why would you bother with something that's thousands of dollars and fragile, and you know, you have to buy tape, and we haven't quite got there. We're like here, and you know, there's still something above it. The best of analog, you know, is still better than digital.
Okay, excellent. Now, you're saying the recordings are done quite quickly, so you've got all these artists fired up on the world's best coffee, looking at the world's most beautiful view. They've recorded their most passionate song. It's been laid down in an hour. You then go into the post-production bit, and presumably there's a bit of discussion about, okay, do we need to overlay this instrument? What about this? How do we mix that? You know, how long does that process take?
that process can take a long time, and it depends on the record that you're working on when you do that. You know, for some records, we just did the Wandering Hearts, which is another British band for Decca Universal, and that was pretty fast. We would do the basic tracks, and then the overdubs was usually about a day, and the mix was about another day. So it's about a 3-day process for most pop records. But I've worked on big pop records as an orchestrator, arranger, and then that could be 3 months later. You're adding a big string section or something. Depends on the budget, depends on a lot of factors. But in general, I like the 3-day rule is about the right one. Record the song, overdubs the next day, sometimes vocals, a mix, and then send it to a mastering engineer who doesn't ruin it, hopefully.
And how much is the artist involved in those discussions? Are you making those most decisions, or are they driving that process?
The artist drives, in a large part, the artist is, you know, creatively, it's a partnership, and it's a push and pull. In terms of arranging, it really depends. A lot of times that really comes from us as producers, like, let's add this, let's add that. But if the artist said, no, I don't want to do that, of course you wouldn't do it. And there are some funny stories about labels going behind the backs of artists, including the Beatles. You know, as you know, Paul McCartney wrote that famous note about "Don't ever touch my songs again." It does happen, but in general, they're involved in it. The artist seems to get less involved as it gets more technical. So they listen to mixes and they'll react to mixes, and most of the time it's something to do with them. You know, if they're the singer, they want more singing, or if they're the bass player, they want more bass. Yeah. You know, the classic thing.
Yeah, that's why the Police tracks and Paul McCartney tracks have always got lots of bass in them. Yeah.
Yeah, but I love that. You know, we've grown up with that, and you're exactly right. And you can't have a good mix without having one thing be a little bit too loud. Yeah. So that process is that, but usually when it comes the end of mixing to mastering, usually the artists, with few exceptions, are almost not involved at all, because it gets.
And during that mixing process, have you had any times where you have got a very clear vision about, you're saying, yeah, look, the song's got to go this way, and the artist is going, well, actually, I really want it to go this way, and you've had a football, not a falling out, but a heated discussion?
It happens all the time. Yeah, I mean, that does happen, where sometimes things don't work. What I've seen work, and actually there's an example from the Bat for Lashes record where Natasha had been recording songs for like 2 years, and by the time she came to us, it was putting together a lot of demos. And I remember we had one song, and it was not coming out right. Like, there was an original vision, and there was probably other producers involved, I don't really know, and she got a little bit frustrated with it, and we were like, you know what, we should just start from scratch instead of pushing and pulling. Let's just re-record it. That's usually the thing that saves the fights, right. or you throw the song away. In that case, it was a really good song. But in general, I haven't seen a lot of fights. Or sometimes people have strong opinions. Yeah. And what I find is, the younger the artist is, the more they hate things, like other artists and music, and usually a little bit more experienced artists are a little bit more open-minded. Yeah. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but the younger ones are usually the ones who will come in and be like, you know, I heard this song on the radio and I hate everything about it. And you'll be like, well, okay, I didn't do it.
It's probably because the younger ones are at their creative peak, and so they have a lot of their own stuff, whereas the older ones are creatively maybe a little thinner on the ground, so they're happy to plagiarize other people. Maybe that's the answer.
I think it's that, but I also think for most young people, when I meet most artists nowadays, they're usually about 18, 19 for the first time, and they're still in that kind of mode that teenagers are in, where their identity is wrapped up in the music they like and dislike. Yeah. Whereas, you know, they strongly identify with certain artists and they hate certain artists, and it's you know, I've had hilarious discussions with young artists sometimes about, you know, something's number one for 10 weeks and they'll be like, I hate that song, everyone should hate that song, and you're like, well, actually the evidence shows that actually people like it. It's for me, I guess I look at it all as kind of funny, Because I mean, in the end, a true producer and a true engineer is you're trying to capture a snapshot of time in someone's life, an artist's life, a writer's life. And if you're a great photographer, if you're a great producer, you're really getting a beautiful shot of that person at that moment. And if you're not so good at it, you gotta, you gotta get a skew shot, and maybe there's an elbow here, or it's out of focus a little bit. That's how I look at my job, and I think that's a good way to look. So all that stuff, the warts and all, I hate this and I love that, that's all part of the photograph.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I'm going to ask you a couple of last questions. What's the album that you've worked on, or the artist you've worked with, that's been the easiest experience? And conversely, which is the artist or album you've worked on that's been the most painful for you to get?
Painful's a tough one, That's like talking a little bit out of school. Probably the easiest hit I was ever on was All About That Bass, which was a Meghan Trainor song from 2015, somewhere around there. My friend Kevin Kadish and I played all the instruments on that song, and Kevin wrote it with Meghan in the morning and sent me like some drums and like a rough things. I added a bunch of instruments, and we were done with the entire track and the entire song within a day. That was the easiest, and it was probably the biggest hit that I've ever been on. Now, in terms of the things that are hardest, I can't say specific people, but I can tell you that the people that are usually the hardest are usually the ones who are the least successful. And I mean, this is I've borne this out. Like, someone says, oh, this is an indie thing, and you don't really know this person, but they're really cool. And usually that's the worst, because whatever it is that have kept them from being successful is you're gonna discover it too in the studio, and you're gonna have the same experience that they've had pretty much over and over again. Whereas most successful people sort of have a lot of different sort of habits that, like, I do this, I do that, we do this, and ways of working with people that allows them to be successful. So for the most part, it's painful. I'd say the craziest experience that I ever had was a long time ago recording Mr. T. I don't know if you remember him, a TV star.
Yeah, from the 18.
From the 80s, from the 18s, yeah. And somebody wanted him to rap.
Okay.
And they forgot to ask him if he could rap. And that was a incredible session where I realized, wow, he doesn't rap. Like, he's not a rapper. And they were just like, dumb, how could he not rap? Look at him, he looks like he could rap. I'm like, that was not a terrible session. It was actually a hilarious session, and I had a lot of fun, but I walked away going, like, you can miscast. You can be in the, I haven't seen a lot of terrible things. I mean, I've seen people cry, and I've seen people leave the studio, and I've seen all the regular drama, but that's par for the course, right?
Passion. Well, but that is the whole point, isn't it? Because that's the passion coming through, and that's what you're trying to capture.
I mean, the more passionate people are, usually the better it is. Even like the crazier they are, sometimes the better it is. Although, one of my close friends, Vaughn Merrick, did a lot of the tracking of Amy Winehouse for Back to Black, and he told me some stories about tracking her, and they were interesting. Just, I mean, he said when she was great, it was hair standing up, all like, you couldn't believe how good this woman is and how talented she was.
Yeah. He
said the trick was getting her to record.
Yes.
So
imagine, yeah. He obviously didn't have the right coffee that you've got.
Well, more of I don't think coffee was what she was after. But I mean, here's the other thing about it. If someone walks into the room and sings for that 3 minutes or whatever it is, and has the talent of, say, like an Amy Winehouse or someone on that level, I mean, you should just thank your lucky stars that you're in the studio with them at that moment. And if you capture it right, record it right, mix it right, master it correctly, and it makes it to high quality vinyl or whatever medium, then it's like one of the luckiest things. So much has to go right for that to be right. That's why we listen to these classic records like Kinda Blue or something like that. And you're just like, how did this even happen?
Yeah. Yeah, because they're actually quite rare. So what you're saying is, look, it's not, that's why there are a lot of mediocre records out there, because getting that everything, all the stars aligned is quite difficult.
Well, think about it. It's like if you went to, you went on safari and you're like, I want a giraffe and a lion and this and that. Okay, can you guys all get into frame? And it's like,
yeah, I'm taking you on my next safari.
I mean, it's a little bit like herding cats, but I think that's why when it works, there's enthusiasm, there's magic. The intention always shows through.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can hear people's intention on good records. You can hear what someone's thinking. You can feel it. And, when the audio is good, it's even better. I mean, that's one thing I know that you and your fans are enthusiasts of good audio. One thing that disappoints us sometimes, and you probably know about this, we're listening on amazing speakers, high fidelity, listen to mastering rooms, and then people are all listening on their iPhones or on earbuds and it's frustrating. That's a frustrating experience because you want them to have the full picture.
Yeah. No, I think as an industry, the whole hi-fi industry is really, in some ways it's great for us because more people now are listening to more music than ever because streaming has made it so accessible. But most of them are listening to it, as you say, on their iPhones, on the less expensive pairs of headphones. And you could all you need to do is take that person, sit them down in front of a semi-decent system. And I've seen it so many times. They just go, wow, that's amazing. I never knew that track sounded like that. And
I've seen it. It's amazing. It's
magical. And our job as an industry is to get those people in front of these systems, because then it's an easy set. They're hooked. Yeah, so it's great. David, it's been fantastic. I'm going to ask you one little thing. Somebody told me that you once played synth on a Michael Jackson track. Is that right?
Yeah, that is true. I spent a few weeks with Michael Jackson a long time ago. Gosh, it must have been 2001. Yeah, I think about that. I was working a lot with Lenny Kravitz, which I've worked with Lenny throughout the years, and he wrote a song that Michael Jackson wanted to sing. So Lenny and I and this engineer, Henry Hirsch, flew out to Los Angeles and made a track. I mean, I programmed drums with a sampler, and I had played ARP 2600, and Lenny played some stuff, and we put together this crazy track, and I got to spend quite a bit of time with Michael Jackson. It was interesting, to say the least. I mean, I was fascinated by Michael Jackson. My dad was the sound guy on The Wiz, so I had met him when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And my dad had worked with Quincy Jones a few times on some other stuff, so I had met Michael like maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, but I didn't know him. I just kind of met him in passing. But being in the studio with him was super interesting. He was very nice, actually, quite kind.
Yeah, but a real perfectionist, I understand as well.
He'd be like, David, can you change that snare drum? I like the other snare drum. And you'd be like, what? And he monitors so loud that you have to wear earplugs. It was insane how loud that guy listened to music. Wow. Yeah, and apparently that was his whole career. Super loud, because he had to feel like dancing.
In the moment. And what was the track that you were playing on?
It's called Can't Make It Another Day, and it was released posthumously by Sony, but they added, our track was more electronic, and then they added Dave Grohl playing drums and Flea playing bass. They just wanted to put a bunch of famous people on the track.
How dare they? Those record studios, they're such cads.
Well, what I always go like, they sit around I go, who's a famous bass player? Okay, who's a famous drummer? I mean, I'm not against it by any stretch of the imagination. But Michael Jackson made these incredible records when he was 25. He made Thriller. So this is like he didn't lose his way as much as like that fiery period of time is long over. I would have loved to have seen those records.
Yeah, great. David, it's been fantastic. Really, really thank you very much for taking the time out to chat to us today, and look forward to it. And hopefully we'll meet again, and I'll share an Amy Winehouse cup of coffee with you.
Sounds good.
Okay. Take care. Cheers. What an interesting guy David was. I really enjoyed that chat. Many thanks, David. for coming on and doing that. I hope you guys enjoyed that at home. Really, really interesting guy, and a bit of insight there into the start of the whole process. You know, how do we get that passion from the artist actually onto the tapes that then go on to make the vinyl. So still to come, we've got a chat with Conrad Mass, who's the owner of Avid, and we're going to find out from him what's behind some of his high-end turntables. We've also got a chat with my very good friend Peter Thomas, who's the founder of PMC Speaker Company. And I do know that he has got a couple of really interesting vinyl tales to tell. And there's also a chance for you guys to ask questions directly to our lead engineer behind the Cyrus Phono Signature, who we're going to have on later for a live Q&A chat, and you'll be able to submit questions via the chat feature on the broadcast. Anyway, now a couple more vinyl recommendations coming up. These ones a bit more of an international flavour.
Hi, I'm Enzanoli, the founder and owner of Audiosphere, a major distribution company for serious hi-fi gear in Switzerland. My friends from Cyrus Audio have invited me to pick an album for the Virtual Record Store Day and to share it with you. My pick is Paul Simon's album Still Crazy After All These Years, released in 1975. I got this album from my former German teacher at high school who had given up collecting records, changing over for CDs. Obviously, that was in the late 80s. At that time, I wasn't really much into Paul Simon, but going through the musicians on the album, I found many of my heroes at the time who were mostly jazz and R&B cats. So I took the album home. Listening to it for the first time, I was only really impressed with one song. That song really had it. The song 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover instantly electrified me with its opening drum riff and the funky chorus, really funky chorus. The riff, performed by the jazz drummer Steve Gadd, is a milestone in pop history and became his breakthrough as a studio musician. Today, Gadd is one of the most recorded drummers ever. Throughout the years, I discovered the beauty of all the other songs too, fortunately. But I would say check it out for yourself. It's great music performed by fantastic musicians. And only remember, when first listening, you should start with 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Thanks a lot and take care. Bye-bye.
Hallo liebe Freunde guter Musik, ich bin Nikolaus Möhring vom Hi-Fi-Studio Hört sich gut an in Bielefeld und wir haben uns überlegt, jetzt euch den einen oder anderen Musiktipp für die Zeit näher zu bringen, wo ihr viel Freizeit habt und hoffentlich auch viel Musik hört. Ich persönlich habe für mich wiederentdeckt eine LP von Nat King Cole, Capitol Records, und zwar die Very Thought of You, ein hervorragendes Doppelalbum. Meiner Meinung nach eine der besten Produktionen von diesem Album überhaupt. Ich hoffe, es wird dem einen oder anderen von euch gefallen. Hört mal rein, vielleicht ist es was für euch. Wir kommen in nächster Zeit auch mit anderen Geschichten noch auf euch zu. Vielen Dank, viel Spaß, bleibt gesund und hört viel gute Musik. Danke.
To me, that's everything. The mere idea of you.
Hi, is this enough social distancing for you? Okay, so our next guest is Conrad Mass. Now, Conrad is the founder and owner of Avid Hi-Fi. Avid being a British high-end manufacturer of turntables. They're actually located about 10 miles down the road from us, so in the heart of Cambridgeshire. We're going to be talking to Conrad today about exactly what goes into manufacturing some of the best turntables in the world.
Good morning, Conrad. Welcome to our virtual vinyl day.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
I'm sure our audience is going to be very keen to learn what goes into manufacturing a really high-end turntable. But let's start at the beginning. What actually motivated you to get involved in the hi-fi industry in the first place?
I don't think I was motivated to get into the hi-fi industry. It wasn't on the
Wasn't your ambition?
careers tickets. No, there was never an initial ambition to get involved. But basically, a friend of mine built a kit turntable and asked me to have a look at it. It worked, but I thought that there was some things that could be done better. And I bought the turntable from him. And that started, if you like, my 20-year quest to basically develop a turntable for my own personal use. And like all hobbies, they become all consuming. So for a long time, I spent my life in reference libraries and even getting jobs at places like foundries and things like that, basically to learn everything that I thought was important about developing and designing this turntable.
Okay, so I mean that sounds like you had some pretty big ideas there.
Yeah, basically, right from the word go, the time that I was doing this, the era, if you like, turntables really focused on things like speed stability, rumble, and things like that. But most people know that when you put your ear near a turntable, you can actually hear the music. And that's because the cartridge vibrates the record like a cymbal. And because the cartridge is essentially a seismograph that picks up vibration, it not only picks up the vibration of the movement in the groove, but it also picks up the record movement itself. It's that record movement that basically has a huge effect on the sound that causes coloration and distortion. My whole concept is that we remove that vibration very effectively, so you get a much cleaner sound, freer from vibration, you get less record wear, and because the cartridge is able to track the groove much more faithfully.
Now, just thinking, because I've had the privilege of looking around your factory, or certainly your old factory. I haven't been to your new place yet.
Yeah.
You've got some pretty substantial machinery there, and you know, when I think about turntables, the kind of tolerances that are involved. I mean, that needle is moving microns, right? So
yes.
What kind of engineering challenges are there? What are the major engineering obstacles that you need to overcome?
Well, once you've got the design, fundamentally you need to reproduce that consistently all the time. There's lots of companies that produce products where they say we treat everyone with loving care. That sounds to me like each one's different.
Yeah.
Every one of our products is exactly the same. You can interchange parts and everything. There's not ever a problem. But you're right. When we first started in business, we used to subcontract all our work to precision engineering companies. We then brought that in-house. So we now have a series of CNC machines. I think the lightest one is 6 tons. So it's not something you do in your garden shed. And that gives us a lot of flexibility. It gives us the flexibility of being able to turn up or turn down production depending on demand. Gives us a beautiful opportunity for quick prototyping work and development. And also it gives us another string to our bow. We can do subcontract work, which we do for many other companies, everything from other audio companies to automotive to defence.
So at Cyrus, what we tend to do is we try and we kind of design a product to 95% of where it needs to be, and then we go through numerous iterations based upon listening tests and so on.
Yeah.
Is that a similar kind of process for designing turntables? How does that work?
For us, no, not really. Once you have the concept, all our designs very much follow form follows function.
Right.
And I can actually probably look at a turntable and tell you how that's going to sound, because I can see the materials that are being used and how it's put together. And very similar to someone who designs a car engine, right, will be able to let you know how that's going to perform by the layout and the size of everything on an engine. So So a turntable is very much more a mechanical device that does a job, as opposed to, say, electronics or loudspeakers, where there's probably a much more necessity to listen to the product, because there are components which you would choose and optimize to the final sound. Whereas with a turntable, with us anyway, is very much, we have our design philosophy and we know how to execute that to get the result. And that's why if you look at our turntable range, you can see a lineage, a DNA, if you like, that follows right through the whole design, right from top to bottom. So we use the same bearing, for instance. There's certain aspects that we'll use which will be consistent throughout our whole design.
So that's quite interesting. So it's quite a different approach. The fact that it's a mechanical device means that the intrinsic behavior of the various materials involved, it makes it very kind of predictable. It's just about manufacturing to that tolerance and having that sound philosophy in the first place is basically.
It is. I mean, there are certain designs where they mix and match materials to get a sound that they want to get. The problem with that type of design is that it works in an environment with a certain amplifier, with a certain pair of speakers in a certain room.
Yeah.
Our approach is that we design things to be a completely neutral, effective reproduction equipment, which sounds very cold and analytical, but basically it will work anywhere and give the maximum performance in any given situation.
Fantastic. Well, that's a pretty good explanation of where you've come from and what's and where you are now. But kind of where are you going? What's on the roadmap for Avid going forward?
Well, some years ago, we evolved into doing some electronics. We started with some phono stages, and what you have to appreciate is this is what could be best described as my train set. So, now we've been fairly successful at turntables. It gives me the opportunity that I can look at other things and bring to bear what we've learned and what we know about a bad, if you like, vibration into other aspects of the audio chain. And my goal is to produce a complete audio system from beginning to end. And we started with phono stages. We then evolved that into now a full range of electronics, from big reference preamps and monoblocks down to integrated amplifiers. And we then sort of looked at loudspeakers. And we evolved again from top down. So we developed our very expensive loudspeakers, and we use that same technology, and we're soon to launch out a new range of more affordable loudspeakers. We also are developing some tone arms to go with our turntables, and we also have some cartridges which we are developing.
And is that your Ruby cartridge?
So this is our Ruby cartridge. This sells for a mere £6,000.
Small change.
As opposed to a lot of manufacturers where they decide they want to do a cartridge, so they buy it from a third party and stick their name on it. Yeah. We've actually designed this from the ground up. And we actually manufacture 99% of all of this, and then someone does all the microsurgery to put it all together for us.
Okay.
So we already do our own cables, racks. So we're very, very close now to having a complete system that we can provide that will follow our philosophy in terms of removing bad vibration away from the good vibration, which is the vibration you want to hear.
Well, certainly if the sounds you've been producing at recent hi-fi shows have been anything to go by, that's definitely a very worthy objective.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Cool. Well, listen, that's pretty much all we've got time for today, Conrad, but I'd like to thank you very much again for being part of this virtual vinyl day.
Yeah, pleasure.
Apologies if my cockerel is a bit noisy in the background.
Not at all.
Such is the nature of working from home.
Yeah.
But yeah, once again, thank you very much from all of us at Cyrus, and I'm sure everyone that's watching as well. And yeah, let's catch up soon.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Conrad. Great to see that not only electronic engineering, but also high-end mechanical engineering expertise is alive and well here in the UK. Around the Cambridge area, actually quite a few of us hi-fi companies around this Cambridge area. I'm actually an Oxford man myself, but there's some great talent around there, and it's a real privilege to be able to draw on that pool. We've got a couple more vinyl recommendations coming up now from two guys called Stuart, but from very different areas of the business. And don't forget, you guys can also send us your vinyl recommendations in the form of a short video, and that will enter you into the competition to win a Cyrus One cast.
We're in Vegas, baby. Everyone loves to win big, and we're giving you the chance to win a Cyrus OneCast smart amplifier, with built-in phono stage, of course. Now, throughout this stream, you'll be seeing videos from our colleagues in the music and audio industry talking about the albums that are important to them and why. And we'd like to invite you to do exactly the same. Simply record your video at home using your phone and then upload to our Facebook page. We'll be sharing some that we like and posting on our Facebook and YouTube channels, and on April the 30th we'll select an overall winner who will receive a Cyrus OneCast. So if you find yourself with a little bit of time on your hands and you want to share your passion with us and with your friends, then why not get recording? Best of luck.
Introducing the OneCast from Cyrus Audio, the world's first high-quality smart amplifier, perfectly integrated with your music streaming apps and voice assistants. For over 30 years, Cyrus Audio has been widely recognised as a market leader in sound quality. The all-new OneCast offers the amazing listening experience you'd expect from Cyrus Audio, coupled with the convenience of your existing services. Listen to your favourite music, radio and podcasts in any room, or several at once with multi-room support. The all-new OneCast from Cyrus Audio. Smart music amplified.
Hi, my name's Stuart Hawkes. I'm from Metropolis Mastering, and I'd like to tell you about my choice for Virtual Record Store Day. So this is the album I've chosen, called No Mercy in This Land by Ben Harper and Charlie Musselwhite. It's an album that was released in 2018. It's the second album these two guys have recorded together. The first one won them a Grammy for Best Blues Album in 2014. So these guys really know what they're doing. The album's a roller coaster ride of emotions for me. You know, 1 minute you're sort of dancing around your living room, next minute you've got your real classic down-tempo blues tracks. Of course, the album, being a blues album, is on blue vinyl, if you like that sort of thing. It was recorded in Santa Monica in a studio over 7 days, just 5 guys all playing together, and you really get that feel when you listen to the album that they're all playing together. It's got a very live feel to it. And I really think you won't regret buying this album. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stuart McGregor and I'm a consultant engineer. Simon's kindly asked me to share my favourite vinyl album with you for Record Store Day. The album I've picked is 10 Years of Gold by Aretha Franklin. This is actually a compilation package of some of her chart hits between the years 1967 and 76. And to me, it showcased her wonderful voice brilliantly and how she could adapt to different styles. Not forgetting the amazing musicians that played with her, and a special mention for the backing vocalists who are unashamedly mixed forward on these tracks. I'm never tired of playing this album, and I know I never will. There's not a bad track on the album, but high points for me have to be the rocky track, Think, track 5 on the first side. This is Aretha, full chat, great brass section and backing vocals. Track 4 on the first side, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, opens with a wonderful gospel piano, and I love the string section on that track. And perhaps track 5 on the second side, which is the last track on the album, Something He Can Feel from the Sparkle album. It's just a great way to finish the album. You've got to listen to the vocal from Aretha on this one. How could I possibly improve this perfect album? I would probably add a cover of Don't Play That Song from 1970 to the collection. For me, Aretha, the band and the backing singers pulled out all the stops on this one, not to mention the sublime gospel piano. Copies of the vinyl album are still available secondhand in record stores, though it never made it onto CD. If you're a digital listener and want to hear these tracks, the compilation that includes most of them will be the 2017 compilation, Respect, the Very Best, which is universally available. So that's my choice. Very special album to me, 10 Years of Gold by Aretha Franklin. Thank you.
Another couple of great choices there, and a new blues album for me to look out for. So fascinated for that. As I mentioned earlier, we are running a promotion linked to Virtual Vinyl Day, where if you buy a Cyrus Phono Signature, you can get our PSXR2 power supply at half price, or if you're an American, that's 50% off. Details of how to access the promotion should be running along the ticker screen at the bottom. Now, fortuitously, we're now going to enter a section where we're going to take a closer look at the Phono Signature, and we'll wrap that bit up with a live Q&A chat with its lead design engineer.
We all like nice things, and whilst it's definitely a luxury, a good hi-fi system is one of those purchases that can bring a huge amount of pleasure to the owner, especially at times like this. That's why for this next section we're going to be taking a deeper dive into one of Cyrus's award-winning products, the Phono Signature. That's a phono stage, in case you don't know. Now we're going to be joined first of all by Bartosz, our European Head of Sales, for a brief introduction to the product. And then we're going to be joined by Martin Flood. Martin is one of our senior engineers and the brains behind the Phono Signature project. And he's going to be explaining some of the novel technologies that go into making this such a special product.
Hi, I'm Bartosz from Cyrus. In this video I'm going to talk in more detail about Phono Signature. This is how we at Cyrus called our high-end phono stage, one of our best-selling products. For those new to vinyl records or turntables, a phono stage is used to amplify the very small and delicate signals coming from the needle on a turntable, so that they are strong enough to be handled by a regular amplifier input. So in short, it stands in between a turntable and an amplifier. Now, some amplifiers have built-in phono stages. While it's definitely convenient and will sound okay, it's a compromise, as being in the same box with other noisy amplifier sections, they pick up additional noise, so the results are never as clean as when you use a separate phono stage. Let's look in a bit more detail. There are two types of pickup cartridges that turntables use: moving magnet and moving coil types. Moving magnet specifications are pretty much standardized, so there is no need for detailed adjustments. These are also easier to implement, and therefore many entry-level and mid-range turntables use this solution. And where you have a phono stage built into an amplifier, these are typically moving magnet compatible only, just like in our Cyrus 1 range. However, high-end turntables mostly use moving coil cartridges. These have an even lower output, but are considered by purists to offer much improved sound. They also have a wide range of characteristics,
so it's important to be able to alter the settings to get the best of the setup. Cyrus Phono Signature is compatible with both moving coil and moving magnet cartridges. As I said earlier, moving magnet type is standardized, and therefore no additional adjustments are needed. But in the case of moving coil, we can separately adjust gain, capacitance, and resistance to find the best match for the cartridge. As you can see, there are many values you can choose from. These settings can also be adjusted and stored using a remote from your listening position as the record is playing. This makes it much easier to keep going from one setting to another until you find the one you like best, and the differences can be very subtle. As mentioned earlier, phono stages receive a very weak signal from the stylus, which has to be amplified many thousands of times in order for us to enjoy a recording. Think again, a few thousand times. It is therefore absolutely critical to keep electrical noise interference as low as possible, as otherwise noise will be amplified together with music, and there are many techniques our engineers employ to reduce electrical noise. Although it's regarded as a reference standard phono stage in its own right, Cyrus Phono Signature is upgradable with an external power supply that we call PSXR2, which further improves the performance by delivering a very stable, low noise power to the Phono Signature's very sensitive component. All you need to do is plug a dedicated PSXR2 connector to the correct socket at the back of Phono Signature and connect both units to the mains. You can tell that the PSXR2 is in use when its red LED changes to green. This combination of Phono Signature and the PSXR is currently the reference phono setup used by What Hi-Fi. It is the benchmark against which all other products are measured. Phono Signature comes with 4 inputs, which can be programmed independently. We know that many audiophiles have more than one turntable or use multiple arms or cartridges. As these may require different settings, we can install those different settings using 4 available inputs. So if you're into vinyl and want to extract every last ounce of performance from your system, try Cyrus Phono Signature. It is widely considered to be one of the very best available. Thanks for watching and happy listening.
So I'm now joined by Martin Flood. Hi Martin, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks.
So Martin, you are the chief engineer behind the design of our fantastic Phono Signature. So welcome,
right.
Welcome very much to the podcast, and thank you very much for joining us today. Now, the relationship that we have is obviously I set a criteria and you guys have to go away and design it all. So I thought maybe for the benefit of the listeners, I'd just kind of recap those that meeting we initially had. So the primary goals really for this product were sound quality above everything else. That was the prime aim, to make something much better than we had before. I also threw a bit of a curveball at you because I said, look, I want to be able to control the different gain, resistance and capacitor settings from the comfort of my own armchair via remote control, which you guys all kind of went, whoa, how are we going to do that? And then I also said, look, and actually what we want is different settings so that people can connect up to 4 different turntables, which again was something we've never really seen before on a phono stage. And you went away and solved that solution admirably. Perhaps you can start off by explaining kind of what are the engineering challenges behind a phono stage in general that you have to get right to make sure that the sound quality is really, really good.
Okay, the first challenge is really to deal with the fact that there are so many different types of cartridge on the market in terms of output levels, from your high output moving magnet cartridge, which gives typically 5 millivolts
You
output.
said that's high output. I mean, my CD player it gives 2 volts, so it's still pretty small, even if it's moving magnet.
That's high output for a cartridge.
Okay.
5 millivolts, all the way down to 100 microvolts from a high quality moving coil cartridge.
So why does a high quality moving coil cartridge give such a low signal output?
Because you need a very lightweight cantilever to be working against the record, because you want a very low inertia. And the only way to achieve this is to have very few coils wrapped around this cantilever, which gives you a very low output. And the phono amplifier has to deal with this very tiny signal.
Okay, so the theory in cartridge design is essentially the lighter it is, the more accurate it can follow the grooves, but the lower the output signal.
That's exactly right, yes.
All right, okay.
Yes.
So you're dealing with this thing that's 100 microns, 100 microvolts. Now, I remember we've talked before about this is the equivalent, if you're turning 100 microvolts into 2 volts, which is what your typical amplifier wants. This is a bit like taking something the size of a CD, so a 5-inch CD, and making it as tall as the Empire State Building. So to give the listeners an idea of the scale of the problem that you're dealing with here.
Yes, you have to take a very, very tiny signal and basically make it very large, so an ordinary amplifier can deal with it.
Okay. And now amplifiers don't amplify, do they? They make copies.
Yes, they make a large scale copy of whatever the incoming signal is.
Okay.
And they do in a variety of ways, but it does require a very high quality amplifier and a very high quality power supply to be able to do that accurately.
Yeah. Okay, so why is power supply quite so important then?
A poorly designed power supply can add noise to the signal, which is not what you want. That's really the main thing. You need a power supply that's very, very low noise, very, very stable, to give you the best possible output signal.
Okay, and I've likened this before to a sort of gourmet chef, because you're making a copy of this signal. The thing that you make the copy from, the ingredients you're using, becomes very, very important to the quality of that actual output signal. So having fantastically clean, beautiful, rigid power which is what you're making this copy out of, is kind of key to that quality process.
You've got to make the absolute best you can of the incoming signal to not lose anything, because there isn't much there to start with.
Right. Okay, so what other tricks do we so you talked about noise and the noise floor being very low on this particular product. Have you got what kind of sort of dynamic range and noise are you managing to get out of this design?
We can get up to 110 dB dynamic range out of this unit. It obviously depends a lot on what your settings are and the cartridge and everything else, but it's always substantially lower than the surface noise of the record,
which is kind of what you're trying to achieve. Okay.
Right, yes.
And so and 110 dynamic range, that's pretty big, isn't it? I mean, what's the dynamic range of embedded in a CD?
Compact disc is 96 dBs.
Okay, so we've got a phono stage that is capable of a bigger dynamic range than all the data that you've got inside a normal CD. So if there is that information there, we can extract it.
That's right, yes.
Okay. So you've talked about low noise. What are you doing inside the design to make sure that you've got such a low noise floor?
Well, the first thing we do is make sure that the incoming signal is buffered and amplified as soon as we can do it. Obviously, we need to have a few things in the way. All the input loading for the cartridge has to be between the input and the first stage. But so long as within a very short distance of the incoming signal, we can provide some amplification. for the signal, it's much less likely then to be disturbed by any electromagnetic interference.
Okay, now I know you've got an open phono sig there for me to be able to show the viewers some of the things on the inside. So, and obviously the signal comes in at the back. Are you able to just kind of show us roughly where all this amplification is to demonstrate exactly how short a signal path this actually is?
Okay. Right, what we've got here, if you can see it, is the inside of the back panel of the phono signature. You can see by the size of my finger the amount of the size that this thing is. We've then got a few relays just inside, which is the cartridge loading, and then right down here is the amplification stage. So that's 5 centimeters from the back of the box, hardly any distance at all.
Okay, so all of that amplification is happening at that lower end of the box. Now you mentioned relays there, and relays are kind of like a key part of this design of this product, aren't they? Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Relays are by far the best way of switching an audio signal. It also means that you can store their settings in a microprocessor. One of the big advantages of this unit is we can have up to 4 turntables connected, and the microprocessor with its memory can remember what settings you have applied to that and recall them instantly that you switch to that extra input.
Okay, so this was when I threw this, you've got to have 4 turntables connected at once. You immediately went down we've got to design a shed load of relays in route, did you?
That's the only way to do it.
Yeah, the only way to do that, and of course turned out to be the most expensive way to do it, of course, because there's this constant battle, isn't there, between management and R&D, with you proposing your high-end, high-cost solutions and me going away and saying, no, you've got to make it perform the same but cost less.
We're always trying to make the best possible product we can make.
Yeah. No, indeed. So, and why are relays so good? I mean, sonically, why are they such an improvement over alternatives?
Relays introduce virtually no distortion, virtually no noise, have no real limits to their bandwidth. They're just like a piece of wire.
Okay, so that they are always the optimal solution. And how many have we got in there? I mean, are you able to get your camera back on there and quickly point out where they are all clustered?
Okay, let's give it a go. Right, looking down here, we've got the 4 relays at the front, the back of the product here, which select between the 4 inputs. We've then got this bank here, which is the capacitance and resistance settings. We then come on to the next 3 here, which are the gain settings for that first amplification stage. Then we've got the mute relays and some output relays as well down there.
So everywhere you can, you kind of put relays into the product, really.
Relays, whenever switching is needed, I'll use relays, yes.
So now that must be a pretty clever design there, because I know, having done the maths, the various capacitance and gain settings we've got on this product, we've got about 160 different combinations, which is significantly more than most other phono stages have, where you might have a sort of high-low or a 3 capacitance settings. Firstly, why have you gone for so many different options? And secondly, have you managed to kind of build that in without making a much bigger box with thousands more relays in it?
I suppose firstly, the reason we put lots of settings is coming back to my point that there are so many different cartridges on the market.
Yeah.
And to be able to accommodate the settings for all of those, and to give the end user some flexibility in terms of, a lot of cartridge manufacturers will claim a range that you can use, but switching different settings in, it might sound slightly different, and depending on what other combinations of components a user might have in his setup, different amplifier, different speakers, personal taste, different types of music, different records of different qualities, you can tweak the sound to however you want it with all this combination.
And how have you managed to get so many of those combinations in? Is that just sort of really thinking cleverly through the circuit layout design and where the relays are put?
Where the relays are put, we try and use very small relays so we can get lots and lots into tiny little space.
Right. Okay. That's great. And now, for inputs, so obviously we've got the microprocessor remembering all the different settings. So you select a different input and then suddenly all these relays switched and changed to wherever you remembered them. Now, my theory was that people have different arms and cartridges and combos for different types of records, and that's why we wanted to put that in. Is that, in your experience, as the case? I mean, what's the feedback that we've had? Do people, are people out there sitting there with 4 different turntables because they got one for 78s, one for 45s, one for pre-1953 vinyl, and one for post-74 vinyl, or whatever it is?
Some do, some don't. Not everybody will have multiple turntables, but we like to offer next flexibility that this product is for everybody.
But we do know, don't we, that there are lots of different sort of types of vinyl, and therefore, depending on what era these products come from, they tend to sound better on different combos, don't they?
They do, yes. And some people might have a particular turntable with a moving magnet cartridge that they are quite happy to play their old records that they'll find in a junk shop, but they wouldn't let their high quality moving coil cartridge loose on these records for fear it might damage it.
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly. And also, yeah, and especially now with the availability of some, okay, admittedly re-released, but really, heavy vinyl, high quality pressings that you want to, look after, really, don't you?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Now, Martin, the other thing I wanted to talk to you a bit about, which always confuses me, is RIIA, which you see.
RIAA.
Yeah, RIAA, which you see a lot on all of these things. Which, okay, what does it stand for? And we've done something a bit more smarter, I would say, in our product. So just talk us through that.
The RIAA pre and de-emphasis network was originally conceived back in the early 50s, and its primary reason is so that you can get more playing time on a record.
Right. And how's it doing that? What's it emphasizing and de-emphasizing?
The low frequencies are attenuated on the record side, and the high frequencies are boosted.
Which makes the groove physically smaller, doesn't it?
Which makes the grooves physically small. You can get a lot of them onto a record, and you can get your 20 minutes playing time. If you recorded it flat, you don't, and you get 5 minutes playing time on a record.
Right.
When we play a record back, we got to do the exact opposite to end up with a flat frequency response.
Yeah.
Now, we know for a fact that record manufacturers don't always strictly follow the RIAA curve, because it would mean an infinite gain of 50 kilohertz, which may sound a very high frequency, but it means a very slight roll off towards the top end of the frequency response. Now, in our RIAA de-emphasis network we put in this product, we account for that, so we get a more accurate frequency response than many other manufacturers would be able to do in theirs.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned 50 kilohertz as well, which brings me on to another point, because the frequency response of this product goes all the way up to 50. Now, the perceived wisdom is that our ears can't really hear anything above 20 kilohertz. So, what's the logic behind making the frequency response, flat all the way up to 50?
The logic is purely from listening tests, really, that we know if we curtail the frequency response too early at 20 kilohertz, it won't sound anything like as good as if we have a flat frequency response up to 50 kilohertz. And that's just purely through listening sessions.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I've been in some of those sessions, so I understand how that works. I mean, there are lots of theories, aren't there? There's theories that you've got harmonics that are folding back into the audio zone. So you might have a harmonics of a 40 kilohertz signal that folds back in below 20 hertz. And there are other theories that say that kind of the timing information in the music is stored in the harmonics of these higher frequencies, and human ears are particularly good at timing and picking out timing. I mean,
it's timing, it's the phase shift that you get on the high frequencies. This all leads to an accurate musical representation.
Yeah, so you have to have all that information coming through in order to get the full gamut of what we want to hear in the audio zone. But
exactly.
There's a cost to that, though, isn't there? Because it's not easy to extend the range that far.
No, you have to have the very best high quality components, very low noise circuitry to be able to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So again, it's another engineering investment which we feel has been worth the payback.
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Now, the last thing I think I wanted to talk to you about is the PSX upgradability. So putting the external power supply on. So the PSX is a external power supply. We supply it to lots of different units. It can be plugged into a whole range of different Cyrus products. When you plug it into the PSX, what's it doing and what kind of benefits can you hear?
The PSX power supply enhances the power supply that's already in the unit and gives a much greater current output, which means much more control of the signal. It's particularly noticeable on the low frequencies. The bass just sounds so much better on a phono signature when you're using a PSX power supply.
Okay, and which bits of the circuit is the PSX powering when you plug it in?
All the audio circuitry is enhanced by the PSX.
Okay, then you're leaving all the other bits, the peripheries like the screen and the other bits and pieces to be powered by the internal power supply.
All the control circuitry is the same as it was. There's no point in enhancing that. It won't be a brighter screen or anything nicer. It's just down to improving the audio.
Yeah. Okay. And the transformers, both in the product and in the PSXX, they're pretty special as well, aren't they?
These are all custom built transformers. We normally have 2 or 3 different ones. We assess the sound quality, decide which is the best, and go for that.
Okay, but these are all custom built. I mean, even before that process, you've kind of given quite a detailed spec, haven't you, to the supplier to try and make
give a very detailed spec to the supplier, exactly what voltages we want, what the current rating is, obviously the physical size of the product, and we just assess it based on what he turns up with.
Yeah, and of course it annoys the accounts department intensely because it means that a transformer from one product can never be used in another product. So our SKU and bill of raw materials increases exponentially because we have to have a separate transformer for not only each individual product, but then again for the 110 and the 240 volt one. So we're doubling up all the time. So it's not a cheap solution by any stretch of the imagination.
Not, but we just want it to sound the best.
Yeah, no, I agree. I sit here and talk with my semi-accountant's hat on because it's my job as managing director, but ultimately I'm all for it and I sign all the checks because passionate about the sound quality is what it's all about. And we want to produce the best products possible. Martin, it's been fantastic to talk to you, even from your isolated converted barn, it looks like there. Lovely.
It is, yes, very nice. It's part of the house now.
Fantastic.
And we had joined on last winter.
Excellent. Okay, well, look, Martin, look, thanks very much for taking the time out to chat to me today. And I will speak to you again soon. Take care.
Great. Cheers, Simon.
Cheers. Bye. Hi, I've temporarily switched rooms because I wanted to demonstrate to you how simple it is to change the phonosignature settings from the remote control, so you can adjust those fine nuances whilst you're sitting in your listening position. So here we are. This is the phonosignature, and this is the Cyrus IR7 remote. The buttons we're going to be using are these numbered buttons down here. So let me just zoom in and show you the unit. So in order to switch inputs, you can do this remotely. So if I just hit the 1 button, you can see it's got the input settings, and I can scroll through those. I'm going to stick with input 1 for the moment, assuming that I've just got the 1 turntable connected. So it's selected 1. Now with the button 2, I can take the warp filter on and off. So the warp filter you put on when you've got a record that's warped, it takes out those very low frequencies which can distort the music that's playing. Button number, I'll take that back off. Button number 3 switches between moving coil and moving magnet. Again, I'm going to leave this on moving coil for the moment because that's where all the fun is and where all the settings are. So input number 4 enables me to switch the gain. So I can be sitting listening to my vinyl and then just, so 40 dB is the lowest. There are 4 settings here. It goes all the way up to 70. But I can change this, let's say, to 60 dB. And if there was a record playing through here, which unfortunately, because we're broadcasting on YouTube, I can't play you any music or we'd be immediately kicked out for rights reasons. But you can see there's a couple of little indicators here. That's actually a level meter. So when the music's playing, there'll be a couple of little meters here which will go up to this line, which is the sort of clipping line. So the idea is to set the gain so that the meters just keep touching the top of that line. Now you'll also notice that the light above the gain button here has gone from green to orange. That means that I've set it to a different setting to the settings that are stored. And again, as I'll go through this, I'll show you how you can then store those settings. So let's say I'm happy with my gain of 60 dB. I then move on to the resistance settings. So that's the remote control button number 5. And there are 10 different resistance settings here, going all the way from 11 ohms right up to 47 kilo ohms. That's 47,000. So I can scroll through a few of these and you can see them. So let's set this one to, let's say 333, because I've been listening and I think, well, yeah, that kind of suits this record. So I hit OK. And again, the light's gone orange because that's different from the settings that are stored. And then I've got my capacitance settings, which is one of the more subtle changes I find when listening to moving coil cartridges. There are 4 different settings here. So there's 220 picofarads. And then it goes up to 1 nanofarad, 2 nano and 3 nanofarads. So I'm going to set this for, let's say, 3 nanofarads. So you'll then see that all 3 of those lights now have gone orange because I've sat here, I've listened to my album, I've decided these are the settings I like, but they're not the ones that are currently stored in memory. So to do that, I simply hit button number 7 and it says, do I want to save these settings? I go, yeah, I actually really like the way this is sounding. I hit yes, it saves that profile and all the buttons have now gone green. So you can see, hopefully, let's just zoom in a little bit more, that we can read those settings there. So that's gain 60 dB, 333 ohms and 3 nanofarads on input 1. So if I go to switch inputs, as I did earlier on, and you'll see that on input 2 I've got a whole different set of settings, and if I zoom out a bit you'll be able to see that's actually switched to moving magnet on that one. So let's move back, let's move that one to moving coil anyway. And you'll see those lights are green because those settings are stored in input 2 of gain, capacitance and resistance settings there. But if I now go back to input 1, so I just want to zoom in on the screen again. There we go. So if I now go back to input 1, you'll see that all of those will change. So again, it's reconfigured all of those all at once. I'm now listening to the settings that I previously set. So that's kind of the main revelation that we built in when we were trying to design this phone, because previously you'd have had to go all the way to the back, flick, reached over and flicked a few switches, then come back and sat down, and it would have taken forever. So really, really simple, really easy way of fine-tuning your records as you're listening to them.
Hello, happy Record Store Day. My name is David Barron. I'm a producer, composer, artist, arranger, and musician, and I love records. One record that I particularly love is the Allman Brothers Live at Fillmore East. My dad was a pioneer of remote recording. His name is Aaron Barron, and he had a truck called Location Recorders, and he was the engineer who recorded that record over 2 nights at the Fillmore East in New York City. The thing that I love about the record is that it feels like you're there. It feels like everything kind of came together with the Allman Brothers musically. Improvisationally, it's sort of akin to kind of Blue in terms of how much communication is going on. I do love the songs. I love Memory of Elizabeth Reed is beautiful and lyrical. Dwayne Allman's playing is out of this world. He's at the height of his powers, and sadly, he passes away shortly thereafter. Like all great records, you feel like you're there. You feel like you're part of the best and coolest and most amazing art that is happening. And that's what records can do. They can be a snapshot of time, sort of a perfect photograph of a place you really like being. And I love being there. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jason, and I would like to share with you my choice for Virtual Record Store Day. Being a guitarist, I grew up listening to guitar-based music, predominantly rock, metal or alternative bands. Now I've got a real soft spot for early 90s guitar sounds on production, that grunge era. And one band and album that really stands out for me is Siamese Dream by the Smashing Pumpkins. It's an album that was produced by Butch Vig and frontman Billy Corgan, and the whole thing was done on analog tape. And if you listen to songs such as Hummer, Mayonnaise or Sommer, you feel like that you're floating in distorted guitars with dreamlike melodies and Billy Corgan's streaking unusual vocals and stadium-worthy guitar solos that keep you drawn into the music. Now I feel that Billy Corgan is a really underrated guitarist and a songwriter. And even though on this record and others it's rumoured that he has overdubbed all parts except for the drums with his own playing, I feel like this album is a real turning point and shown that he is capable of writing and producing brilliant iconic songs with real sonic depth. This album was jaw-dropping ever since the first time that I listened to it. So if you're in the mood for something a little bit heavier, put this record on, sit back and turn it up loud.
So I hope that has given you a bit more of an understanding about the challenges behind building a really good phono stage, and also why the promotion that we're running at the moment involves combining that phono signature with a PSX-R2 power supply, because having clean power is so important to producing high quality sound. Your chance to ask Martin some questions directly coming up in a moment. You'll be able to do that using the chat feature at the bottom of the broadcast, and we know that is working because I've seen a lot of messages coming through, so thanks for those, including a few people asking, why are you not playing any music? Well, unfortunately that's a YouTube phenomenon, so we don't have broadcast rights to any music. So if we started broadcasting music, I think the stream would be immediately seized upon and shut down because of all the music rights bots that are traveling the internet. So that's why we're not really playing any music. Apologies for that for those who are expecting to be able to get on dance through the whole of this broadcast, but with all the vinyl recommendations we've made, hopefully you'll be able to do all that in your own time. We've got another couple of guests now coming up talking about their favorite LPs, and don't forget, look, if you're inspired by any of these choices, please do the pledge for a Record Store Day. So that's hashtag RSD fill the gap, and spread that out on social media. We're just going to remind you one more time about how you can enter the competition, and then we're going to be joined by Martin so you can ask him your questions directly.
We're in Vegas, baby. Everyone loves to win big, and we're giving you the chance to win a Cyrus OneCast smart amplifier, with built-in phono stage, of course. Now, throughout this stream, you'll be seeing videos from our colleagues in the music and audio industry talking about the albums that are important to them and why. And we'd like to invite you to do exactly the same. Simply record your video at home using your phone and then upload to our Facebook page. We'll be sharing some that we like and posting on our Facebook and YouTube channels, and on April the 30th we'll select an overall winner who will receive a Cyrus OneCast. So if you find yourself with a little bit of time on your hands and you want to share your passion with us and with your friends, then why not get recording? Best of luck.
Introducing the OneCast from Cyrus Audio, the world's first high-quality smart amplifier, perfectly integrated with your music streaming apps and voice assistants. For over 30 years, Cyrus Audio has been widely recognised as a market leader in sound quality. The all-new OneCast offers the amazing listening experience you'd expect from Cyrus Audio, coupled with the convenience of your existing services. Listen to your favourite music, radio and podcasts in any room, or several at once with multi-room support. The all-new OneCast from Cyrus Audio. Smart music amplified.
So I'm now back joined live with Martin Flood. Hi Martin, how are you?
Hi Simon, good thanks.
Didn't drag you out of bed too early on a Saturday morning, did I?
I'm fine. Just about woken up.
So we will have some questions coming through, which I hope I'll be able to see. But I have seen one come through already. Somebody asked, why is vinyl better than CD? What's your take on that?
I think vinyl always sounds so much less compressed than any digital source. That's the main reason. It's just much more natural in everything it reproduces.
Okay, I've seen a couple of people saying well done and thank you very much. And I think also someone was asking about preamps and why, if we have a separate preamp, why is that necessarily better than preamp power and integrated?
Well, I think certainly in terms of the phono signature, there's no way you could build that flexibility into something that had lots of other components in the same box. Also, I think having its own dedicated power supply, either an internal one or external one to it, just makes it so much cleaner. It's a much easier way of doing it.
Okay, there's another question that's come in that says, what causes the artificial glare on CD recordings? I'm not quite sure what they mean that. I think maybe that's sort of the harshness that you sometimes get.
Not being a great digital expert, but I would imagine it's the problem with anything digital. Sound always starts off life as an analog waveform.
Yeah.
You have to convert it to digits. The conversion process has some errors in it, and before you can listen to it, it's got to be converted all the way back again. So by keeping things analog, it's always likely to be a better source.
Yeah, I think there's also a dynamic range issue here, isn't there? Because I mean, I've done a couple of lectures talking about what dynamic range is. You know, when we talk about what the human beings can hear. So right from, you know, somebody breathing in the room next to you to being within 30 feet of a jet fighter taking off. You know, that's something like about 120 dB, but even then you will be deaf at the end of it. And we know that a CD only has 96 dB of bandwidth on it, so you can't go from the quietest quiet to the loudest loud, and I think somewhere in that compression process to squash it down is where you get those slight tonal anomalies. Is that a fair summary?
I don't think so. CD is limited in its conception to 96 dBs. There's nothing else you can do about that. With an analog source, there is no limitation. It's just as good as you can get it.
And what kind of, I mean, obviously you guys are always really focusing on getting noise floor down, so the dynamic range on all of our products increases. I mean, what did you get out of the PhonoSig, for example? What kind of?
I think at its best it's about 110 dBs, but it depends on cartridge loading, gain settings, lots of other things. It's always better than the noise floor of a record. That's the main thing that's important.
Okay, so the record's got a bit of surface noise on it anyway. So as long as your dynamic range can be below that, then you're always, the electronics are never going to be the weakest link in the chain.
Exactly right. Yes.
Yeah. Now I know you've got. The R&D department's got an ambition, haven't you, to produce an amplifier with what's the dynamic range you're shooting for at the moment on the stuff you're working on?
140.
140.
Theoretically get.
Okay, so that is impossible, I know, but you're hoping to get so close to 120-ish, aren't you, or even above that?
Yes, as good as we can get it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So that's coming through. Someone is asking about the half-width size cases. Does that cause more engineering challenges in isolating circuits from noise, dissipating heat, etc.? That is an interesting one. Go on.
It's an interesting one. Certainly in terms of power amplifiers, it does produce a headache. Limited size boxes. The Cyrus chassis has a built-in heatsink, so you are limited what you can do with that. For the small signal stuff, it's not so much of a headache. I suppose in some ways it's an advantage because at least you know the box you're starting with.
Yes.
With a lot of product manufacturers say, well, what size box do you want? And then they say, you get halfway through the design and somebody will say, well, you can't make it that size. You start again, do something else.
Yeah.
At least at Cyrus, we always know what we're starting with in terms of our form factor, and we have to work within that.
Yeah, and I think that there are sort of pros and cons. I mean, you guys in engineering are often complaining and saying, well, can't we go to a bigger box? And I'm saying, well, that's not the point of the brand. You know, it's designed to be a system of boxes that look similar and stacked together. And also the aluminium, the die-cast aluminium chassis has a number of major advantages in that it's vibration and non-ferrous, so it's non-magnetic, providing a stable base. And I think for those of you who aren't so familiar, all Cyrus products are built upside down, aren't they, Martin? Do you want to just talk through the theory of that?
They are. It's simply because we attached the PCB to what is essentially the roof of the product. And we spend all our lives in R&D sitting there looking at the product upside down, so it actually looks quite strange to us sometimes when we see them out on the showroom and they're the right way up, and we think this is very odd.
Yeah, and that's to provide this extra layer of effectively vibration absorption, because you're hanging everything from the ceiling as opposed to sitting the electronics directly on the floor. So vibration's got to come through the product to get to the sensitive electronics.
That's right. Yeah, big advantages in that respect.
Yeah, and so I think in summary, small size is good because signal paths can get small, so it does help in that respect with low noise design. But yeah, the constant problem we run into as a brand is heat dissipation. How do we get heat out of the box? And I think that's another reason why we've spent a lot of time looking at this Class D hybrid platform that's in the 1 Series and the Stereo 800 and a couple of other products, which a lot of work on that, isn't there, Martin?
Yes, Class D is a way of getting a much more power out of an amplifier without it getting too hot. It obviously sounds very different to a Class AB amplifier, which is our flagship sound.
Yeah, but you guys have done a fantastic job making that Class D hybrid sound much closer to Class AB. So I think people are quite appreciative of that. I've got another question here. Any plans to release a more cost-effective phono stage, perhaps around the £750 mark? The honest answer, not at the moment. I think the phono stages that we're building into the 1 Series products are, we think, quite a lot better than some of the other people's, because we've taken a lot of the topology, certainly in the moving magnet section, out of the phono sig and dropped that into the one cast. Isn't that right, Martin?
That's absolutely right. Yes, if you're using a moving magnet cartridge, it's a very similar circuitry path in those products.
Yeah. So whilst we're not doing a cheaper phono stage, we are trickling down the technology into the other products. We probably have to wrap this up because I know there's quite a few. Looking at my schedule in front of me, there's quite a few other things we've got to get through. So thanks everyone for firing your questions in. Really enjoyed that. And Martin, I'll speak to you next week.
Pleasure as always, Simon. See you soon.
Yeah, take care. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, my name's Simon Lucas and I'm a technology journalist. I've been writing about hi-fi for quite a while now, and Cyrus has asked me to choose my favourite vinyl album for Record Store Day, which is kind of them. Obviously it depends on which day you ask me, and it depends on what sort of day it's been, but today, and to be honest a lot of the time, my favourite vinyl album is this, which is Spirit of Eden by Talk Talk. It's their 4th album. It came out in 1988, and until this point, they were kind of an unsexy Duran Duran, quite a pop act. This is not a pop album. This is where the idea of post-rock probably gained a lot of validity in the first place. There are 6 pieces on this album. It's quite sprawling, it's very muscular, and it's tender sometimes. It's very melodic and it's discordant sometimes, but it's always affecting and it's always moving. And I come back to this album a lot. There are no hits on it. I mean, that goes without saying, but it's very influential. I think it's responsible for any number of really good records and any number of terrible records, none of which could ever have been made, I don't think, without Spirit of Eden.
Hi, I'm Nick Clark from Harman, and I'd like to share with you my choice for Virtual Record Store Day. I've always been a massive fan of the progressive rock album, and in my humble opinion, this is the very pinnacle of that genre. Radio Chaos by Roger Waters. Obviously, Roger Waters of the Pink Floyd rock giant fame, and this is one of his solo outings. For me, it has some of the very best production values I've ever seen or heard, rather. And it's a great demo piece, but it's also great because it just sucks you in. You know, you'll want to listen to the whole album from start to finish. So if you don't have a copy, I thoroughly recommend you get one. If you do, you probably haven't dragged it out in a little while, then please do so and enjoy it once again. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jackie Smiley from Starscream Communications. Happy Virtual Vinyl Day. I'd love to share with you my favorite record, Prince, Piano and a Microphone, recorded in a single take at Prince's Prince Paisley Park studio in 1983. I grew up in the generation of CDs and cassette tapes, and recently became a vinyl lover. And I think this record is really special because Prince, it's just him, a piano and a microphone, and it feels like you're stepping into his emotional world, because sometimes you hear him sniffle, sometimes he makes mistakes, and sometimes he just wants to jam, and it feels like you're stepping into his emotional world. And I really like that raw emotion that this album gives to us. So enjoy, and thanks.
So another few album recommendations there for you. And again, if you're interested in supporting your local record store, hashtag RSD Fill the Gap, make a pledge to buy one when they reopen. And thanks very much for Martin there for braving taking your questions live, and thanks very much for those of you who sent questions in. Really interesting angles that you guys are coming from, so thank you for that. And don't forget, if you are interested in getting a phono signature with a half price PSXR2 power supply combination, you can email in details somewhere at the bottom of the screen. So now I think it's time for our next guest interview.
Ah, delicious. Hopefully we'll all get back to socialising normally soon, going out to pubs and bars and so on. But in the meantime, it's a really good opportunity for us to enjoy the hobby that we all love, listening to some great music on some amazing hi-fi systems. Now, the hi-fi industry is blessed with some great, vibrant characters, and none more so than our next guest today, Peter Thomas from PMC. Now, Peter has a wealth of experience in the industry, starting off at the BBC and then, of course, building PMC loudspeakers to the international force that it is today. And along that way, he's gathered some amazing stories, some of which I hope he'll share with us today. So, without further ado, welcome, Peter.
So my next guest is Peter Thomas. Peter is the managing director of PMC, the well-known speaker company. Peter, welcome.
Hello, Simon. Nice to talk to you.
And thank you very, very much for participating today. Now, the one reason I was really keen to get you involved is you must be the man with the largest record collection I know. How many LPs have you got?
More than one. I have never really counted them, but it's quite a few thousand. I think it's probably about 4,000 or 5,000 albums. Same amount of 78s, because I love 78s as well, which is strange for somebody into audio, because obviously the quality is not quite as good. And they're probably about 4,000 45s as well.
Gosh, wow. And the 78s, now that's interesting. So do you have a particular special turntables that you play those on to A, not wreck your stylus, or B, get the best out of them?
I do, yeah. I have an old Garrard, an old SME and a Garrard 401 to play the 78s on. And they have about 6 different size styli. So I can cope with all the different variations. What's remarkable about them really is actually the sound quality when you play them well is not bad actually. They record it very well, direct to disc, most of them. So they're pretty lively. You've got that sort of, I love blues and jazz, so you get that passion and that liveliness from the direct cut.
Yeah, no, fantastic. In fact, and in some of the testing tracks that we use, tuning kit, I often use some of those older recordings, because that's a real test, isn't it, of is the passion of the music coming through rather than just the mucking about with the recording quality.
Yes, I think so. It's a weird situation, really, that the poorer the quality, sometimes it makes you focus on how well you're reproducing whatever the recording is. And we often use at PMC different recordings that aren't actually that good, because, you know, when you play a really good recording on a system, often it'll sound good on anything. Even if you play it on a Dansette record player, it still sounds great. It's one of those, you know, those recordings where, you know, they just sound brilliant on everything. So sometimes it's good to have recordings like that are, you know, that are not A1, but they reveal a lot about your system.
Yeah, no, exactly. Now, what got you into vinyl in the very first place? What was your first step on your 4,000 or 5,000 collection ladder?
I suppose, I mean, I had a much older brother and sister. They were about 10, 15 years older than me, the two. And they used to bring home loads of 45s throughout the early 60s. So I got to know them very well, and I got to know all the B-sides, because they used to stack them on these big auto changers, turn the 10 records over and play the other sides, which is kind of criminal from our point of view now, because they all used to skid as they landed on each other. But I got to know that music really well. I think there was that, and of course the other thing was my grandfather gave me a wind-up gramophone when I was about 8. And a big pile of 78s, which I think probably that's what started me on the path to listening to that music. And I was kind of always fascinated by this wind-up gramophone, how sound came out of it, not plugged into the electricity, and it sounded great, you know. So I think those two things that got me into discs, I suppose, is the best way to describe it. And I've obviously got more interested in vinyl as I got older because of the sound quality, and of course stereo through the 60s gradually developed, and that was, I mean, back then that was quite a fantastic leap, a bit like, I mean, probably more even than 5.1 is and Dolby Atmos is today. It was quite a big jump to go to stereo. That was remarkable.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I remember my father had all of the original Beatles albums in mono, because they all came out mono, and then suddenly he brought home a stereo version. I think it was Revolver was the first one. It might have been Rubber Soul. And I think it was Revolver was the first one that was naturally recorded in stereo.
Yeah.
And yeah, completely different. You know, completely. Suddenly, there's a soundstage which you've never heard before, which was an amazing experience.
But of course, back in those days, it was always a bit of a lash up. I mean, a lot of the turntables or record players, as they were then, often had a stereo output on them, and you could plug in a tape recorder and use the tape recorder as the other channel, or a separate little box you could buy as an add-on. So it was all a bit of a lash up for most people for stereo. But and I guess that's why those stereo recordings were so stereo, you know, ping pong stereo, because it then showed off how good the stereo was.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so you're clearly now displaying your technical capabilities, because you are obviously by trade an engineer, having been one of the very early guys at the BBC. Do you want to just give us a little brief synopsis of what you were doing there in your early days?
Yeah, personally, I feel I joined it at a wonderful time. The BBC had got an incredible amount of income coming in because the colour TV licence started to pay off in the 70s, and I joined in 78. And suddenly a lot of money was made available to BBC Radio. BBC Radio was always sort of like second to TV back in those days. And suddenly we were working on, I joined the BBC as an engineer, looking after studio equipment. Remarkable place. They gave you 6 months intensive training on everything from microphones, all the different types of microphones, how to repair them, how to design them, all the way through to the recording desks, to the tape machines, what they worked, all the theory and how to repair and calibrate them. Same with turntables, loudspeakers, obviously. Everything, all the way through to the transmitters and the tuner, the FM tuner in your home, listening in stereo. So you have this wonderful picture of the whole of the audio chain. And so we worked in studios, and that's what I joined as. And over a period of about 3 years after I joined, we moved from all these really old valve studios that have been there since the 1930s, all the way into computer-controlled desks. So an incredible amount of change. I mean, the BBC had sort of several hundred studios in central London at that time. So it was an enormous task. They changed everything: speakers, mics, desks, everything. All the tape machines. I remember they ordered 250 tape machines from one manufacturer. That must have been a happy day for him, I reckon. What a wonderful order. And they were £5,000 each. That was back in 1980. So that was quite a nice order. So, it was a remarkable time of change. And at that time, you worked in all the different departments, in drama, in speech studios, and also in music studios, because I always loved music studios. So eventually I became the head of the services manager of the music studios out at Maida Vale and around central London, which was up my street.
And what got you into the loudspeaker design? How did you sort of move into that sphere?
Well, one of the roles I inherited while I was there was the representative for BBC Radio on loudspeaker standards. This was partly to check that the BBC designs were being manufactured by the licensees to the standard that was set by the BBC. I remember back then the BBC didn't think that anybody made any equipment that was good enough for them. We were quite full of our own egos back then. But they had a point. I mean, a lot of speakers, certainly in the 60s, were pretty, they were all right, but they weren't great. So the BBC had its own designs department. It manufactured some of them itself as well. But it licensed them out these designs, and we would test them against references. So I'd go down to Kingswood Warren, where the research department was, and we'd do a lot of A/B listening. And we had lots of technical difficulties. Obviously, sometimes drivers were variable, and we had to either listen to them and measure them. And then in the end, the LS35A, for example, was redesigned because of some of the technical problems with the drive units. So I got into it from that side of it, but then also at the same time, because I was looking after the big music studios where like the John Peel prog was done from, recorded. Radio 1 and 2 had these big studios, and they were using like tannoys and speakers like that, because the BBC speakers wouldn't go loud enough. I mean, in a big recording studio, music studio, you need bulletproof speakers that will produce very high SPLs. So they knew I was into speakers through both my home interest, because I was a big hi-fi enthusiast, and also through the speaker thing. And they said, why don't you try and design basically a big hi-fi speaker that goes incredibly loud, that sounds like a BBC monitor. And that's what started PMC, really. Me and my friend Adrian Loader, who we both formed PMC together, we spent through 3 years, I suppose, while we were at the BBC in our own time, developing what became the BB5, the first speaker that we manufactured. So, and of course at that point they turned around to us and said, turned around to me and said, well, you can't work at the BBC and sell to the BBC. So I had to leave, which was looking back, was an incredibly risky thing to do, because I had 2 young children, a big mortgage, and I had one product to sell. So
one customer.
Yeah, one customer. So from a business plan, that probably, if you wrote it down, wouldn't look that impressive.
At least it would have fitted on one piece of paper.
It certainly would, probably half. So very quickly we thought, well, we ought to design something else. And so I designed the LB1, which was the smallest transmission line speaker that had ever been developed. We were very wedded to the transmission line principle. Me and Adrian had both owned IMF transmission lines since the very early 70s. And although they had their faults, we loved the characteristic, there's something magical about the bottom end that we liked, and we felt that, you could develop that technique. Very few people sort of did it then. So we were quite pleased.
For those of the uninitiated listening, do you want to give a 2-minute précis on the transmission line principle and its benefits?
Sure. I suppose the best way to describe it is it's a speaker at the end of a big, long, folded tunnel inside the cabinet. And what that does, it allows the cabinet to control the diaphragm movement. And what it does, it keeps it very, very low. So as you go down in frequency, the distortion is kept very, very even. One of the problems with most speakers is as you go down in frequency, the distortion gets very, very high. There are lots of different techniques to control that. But we found that the transmission line was one that really did reduce distortion a great deal. The real big byproduct of that I love is that because there's low distortion in the bass, the mid-range now blossoms. You get this lovely big image in the room. And that's what really attracted me to it. But of course, the other byproduct of it is that you can get remarkably good low-frequency bass from not too big a cabinet, which is another big plus if you're in the home where you don't want a massive pair of speakers.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a great, that's what drew me to it. Ironically, the only other speaker that I liked years ago were electrostatics, which is, when you think of it, is a completely different design, but it also has very low distortion, and that's why the mid-range sounds so nice. I didn't realise that back then, but that's what they have in similarity. So, the negative, of course, is that they are really complex cabinets to design. So we have very long R&D times to bring them to market. But I think it's worth it because I think the benefits are great, and we're still learning more about them.
Yes, no, and I think the combination of the PMC and the Cyrus amplifiers always seems to work quite well in my view, and some of that matching can be, you try and design amplifiers that will drive all speakers, but invariably there are some that work better than others.
There are. I mean, one of the nice things about transmission lines as well is it allows us to produce a speaker that's a reasonable load to the amplifier. So it will match your amplifiers better. It's not so demanding. There are a lot of speakers out there that they sound great, but they need some massive great amplifier to be able to cope with, the way the speaker loads the amplifier. Well, we've never gone down that path.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and in terms of amplifier design, what we're focusing on is obviously trying to produce an amplifier that's got amazing sort of peak current output, because it's that sudden current drive that these speakers suck up.
Absolutely.
Now, you were telling me the other day, because we've known each other a long time and often stop and have a cup of coffee and other things. And most people would have thought that speaker design hasn't changed much, because when you look at the core technology, it's a code. But actually, underneath the skin, design has come quite a long way. Do you just want to expand on that a little?
Yeah, I suppose, it's like saying, cars have still got a body and four wheels. I mean, yes, speakers are still very similar looking in many ways, but the developments that have happened behind the scenes are quite remarkable. I mean, I think especially computer technologies that accelerated that process, because we're now able to measure things that we wouldn't have had time to. I mean, my son now heads up our R&D team, and they measure things in like 5 minutes with a laser beam and a computer-controlled measuring kit that would have taken me a day to do. So, you can explore things when you're developing a speaker way more. Probably something like quite simple is like a drive unit. One of the problems with drive units is there's lots of bits that are glued together. You've got little rubber surround, you've got the cone, you've got the dust cap in the middle, and behind it you've got the neck of the voice coil, and all these parts are all glued together. And the type of glue you use changes the sound at every joint. Whereas in the old days, you had to keep building all these different prototypes, and it took months, Whereas nowadays, you can model them on computers and get pretty close to it within 80%. So the speed that you can turn around the design. So developments in drive units is phenomenal. We're measuring cabinets to try and make them vibrate less, so we can measure them with little accelerometers to show how quickly they stop vibrating. There's all sorts of things now you can explore, which you could have done years ago, but it would have taken like 10 years to bring a speaker to market. Meanwhile, you wouldn't have any money.
Yeah.
So you're now, you've got this phenomenal acceleration. You also see in the really inexpensive speakers now, you can go into quite, shops that sell speakers for £100, and they're not bad now. I mean, the work, there are some terrible ones, I know, but some of them are quite remarkable because all that development now is producing better and better performance. And I think for speaker designers, that's a fantastic time, really. It's changing quickly. I think the downside, I think, Simon, is that a lot of people aren't embracing a lot of that, and they're producing speakers that you could have made 40 years ago. And I think that's disappointing, because you might want to drive a car that's 40 years old as a retro, but it doesn't perform anywhere near like a modern car. And that's true of a modern speaker, or it should be.
Yes, yeah, no, I agree. And there are lots of things out there where It's always listening to the kit or the speaker or the amplifier, whatever it is, that suddenly people realise that, wow, there's been a massive jump in performance since I last went through this exercise. Yeah.
What's really interesting, I mean, at PMC we've got a museum of speakers, all different manufacturers. I mean, we're going to hope to open it at some time so that people can go and see it. But when you listen to them all, I mean, there are some key speakers that still hold up pretty well, but 95% of them don't. You know, I mean, you can find those ones that really sound, I mean, you know, like the LS35A, that's why that's still popular, because it was so ahead of its time. It's still not bad. I don't think it's up to the standard we can do now, but it still holds its own. But most of those speakers you listen to and you sort of go, well, yeah, things have moved on a lot, you know.
Yeah, they're amazing.
And they're also pretty ugly as well, a lot of them.
That is true. Yes, yeah. And the number of times my wife says, "What have you got that in here for?" Yeah, we've got a whole nother topic of conversation. Now let's just drag this back to vinyl, because obviously that's what this day is all about. I've been looking at your background there, and I'm pretty sure those are records, but because of the perspective, they look a bit sort of CD-like, but they're not. They're vinyl, aren't they? Do you want to get one out just to prove to everyone how many you've got?
Yeah. I'm not quite sure which way round you like to go, but you can see that these are records.
Wow. So that is, and what percentage of your collection is that in that wall behind you?
It's about well, it comes around the corner, so there's a whole other big raft of them upstairs. About sort of just over half, I think, probably.
Wow.
You take up a lot of room, I mean, it's like, you know, and 78s, of course, take up even more room because they've only got 3 minutes on them and they're massive.
Yes.
So at least there's 40 minutes on each of those.
And now the interesting thing, of course, because where the word album actually comes from the days of 78s, doesn't it? Because you could only get 3 minutes on each side.
Exactly. If a classical piece of music was released, it had to be released in an album of about sort of 5 to 6 discs to cope with all the, you know, to all the transitions at every 3-4 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's why they were called albums. And I think it's more of an Americanism. I mean, they were. We certainly adopted the word LP much more in the 50s when they came out. But then we've gone a bit American with the album. But that is the original name of them. The original reason why we call them albums.
Yeah.
And they weighed a ton, those albums.
Okay, so I think what I'd like to try and wrap up with, Peter, is your favourite piece of vinyl. So we've asked a lot of people throughout the day to select their one album or vinyl of choice, and you've got a particularly special one, I understand.
I have. I bought this record back in 1970 when I was 15. I didn't like it at first. I remember a girlfriend of mine lent it to me and I really didn't like it. And then about 3 months later, I heard it again and bought it. And when I was working at the BBC, they were doing a program about Trident Studios, which is where this album was recorded. And an engineer came in with this reel of tape, and on it were 5 piano demos of the tracks that were released. And the album is Elton John's second album, which was this one. It's called the Elton John album. I don't know if can you see that? Yeah. People refer to it as the Black Album because if you say it's an Elton John album, it doesn't really narrow it down now. Back then it did because this was only his second LP. Now, this chap at Trident that had these piano demos, I very kindly got a copy of those, and they sat in my archive for the last 40-odd years. And then I had a conversation with Universal Music, who are going to release the 50th anniversary of this album this year. And they were a bit short of one of their piano demos. They didn't have one in their archive. And I had it from this tape back from the 70s.
Wow, amazing.
So that's now going to go on the 50th anniversary edition of the Elton John album, the Black Album. And that's released. Well, it was going to be released on Record Store Day, which of course has been postponed, but it'll come out eventually. And I think we're getting a PMC credit on it for supplying that track.
Oh, amazing. Fantastic. Fantastic. So that is your album of choice. Any particular favourite track on that one?
I suppose so. I mean, I quite like The King Must Die. Not a very positive sounding title. I think what I loved about it was quite. The trouble is, when you retrospectively look at these albums, you can't often see why on earth they were so big at the time.
Yeah.
But I think what had happened was the Beatles had broken up in '69. There was a whole revolution of changing from bands to singer-songwriters. You know, there was quite a transition around 1970. You know, Joni Mitchell came out, there were Cat Stevens, David Bowie. A lot of singer-songwriters became popular. And Elton John was one of those artists as well. And then Gus Dudgeon, who produced Space Oddity with David Bowie, he was brought in to produce this album. And he did this absolutely wonderful production job on it. And he brought in this young guy, Paul Buckmaster, who did string and orchestral arrangements. And the soundscape that they produce on this album is really quite something. And that was the thing that really hit me. It was quite a different sound then, not now, but back then it was. And they released it in 5.1 about 10 years ago. And that even shows up even more of how remarkable those recordings were back then. And I think it was done on a 16 track. So, and it was done in a few days. You know, it was pretty. They turned them around quick in those days.
Yeah, studio time was expensive then, wasn't it? Of course.
It was huge, and of course he was an unknown artist. He wasn't. You know, I think it cost £5,000 to make the album, which was quite a lot of money back in 1970. And Dick James of Dick James Music took a bet on it that it would be popular, which was quite a risk. But I think that's what happened back then. Artists were often, allowed to play around with their art for several years before they actually made a return for the record label. Whereas, of course, today people want instant return. So it changes the dynamic of how music is developed or how an artist develops. You know, he or she has got to make a successful record very quickly.
Instant impact, yeah. And I guess given that sort of soundscape on that album, that again is one that really benefits from a good system. You can really see the difference on it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really nice recording. I have to say, I still think first pressing to the album probably sounding the best, which is often true of old vinyl. The first pressing often re-releases, the tapes have deteriorated, or maybe they've actually misplaced the original tapes. It's quite common. I remember going to the studio once and they were actually producing a CD from a cassette copy of an album because all the tapes were missing. So, you know, getting an original vinyl copy, which they're still out there, is probably the best way to hear it and how it was intended to be listened to. Brilliant. I think that's the other thing you've got to realise is that the whole focus, like you were mentioning about the Beatles earlier, you know, those original first albums are all designed to be played in mono. The stereo releases that came later aren't really very successful until you get to Revolver, which were really designed for stereo. And I think that also goes for the medium that they were recorded for. These albums were recorded to be played on vinyl. Nobody had access to anything else. So to me, it probably the whole thing sounds better on that medium.
Yeah, because it was designed for that. Now, I agree. I mean, there are lots of albums that just sound better as albums. And I remember when CDs first came out. I think one of the first CDs I had was one of the Rolling Stones ones that had Start Me Up on it. And it just didn't sound the same on the CD, you know, because it just sounded too brittle. And, you know, CDs come a long way, and obviously streaming's come a long way, and now recording techniques have come a long way. Yeah. And, you know, people going to a recording studio knowing it's going to be streamed and it's mastered to work well over that medium. But you're right, it's always good to listen to music on the source for which it was originally created, I think. Yeah,
I think so, yeah. And as I say, never underestimate the fact that later releases are made from inferior original copies. Yeah. You know, that's quite common. I mean, the Beatles were very lucky to have EMI because their archive is humidity controlled. They've cherished all their tapes and looked after them, and that's why all these re-releases are available, because they've kept the tapes. Whereas most artists, their record labels have disappeared, and the tapes have, you know, got moved around over the decades, and it's very difficult to locate an original master. So it's always been a challenge, I think, for re-releases to find an original tape. And that's just, you know, anyway. Yeah.
Peter, that's been absolutely fascinating. I really enjoyed chatting with you again, and some wonderful stories that I hope will lift the spirits of our listeners who are down in their houses. And no doubt when this is all over, we'll be sharing the odd cup of coffee again soon.
Oh, definitely. I'll book that coffee. Is that a euphemism for coffee, is it? Might be something strong.
Peter, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. Take care.
Yeah, really good to talk, Simon.
Yeah.
Speak to you soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Polished album than previous offerings. Hello, I'm Jay Garrett. I'm the UK editor of the online hi-fi magazine StereoNet, and I'm here to talk about one album for Virtual Record Store Day. Now, that album was almost Iron Maiden's Live After Death. I nearly chose Left Field's Leftism. I almost went with Pretty Hate Machine by Nine Inch Nails. But instead, I've chosen 1987's release of Floodland by Sisters of Mercy. Now, at the time, this album managed to alienate both fans and band members. It saw Andrew Eldridge bring in more synthesizers to join Dr. Avalanche, the long-standing drum machine. And he also brought in Larry Alexander and Jim Steinman to produce. That's right, the Bat Out of Hell guy. The result is a much more polished album than previous offerings, but it's also lacking some of the live feel that people had grown up to enjoy from Sisters of Mercy by this time. But for me, as a 16-year-old, seeing them perform this Corrosion for the first time on Top of the Pops, I couldn't care less. They looked cool, and tracks such as Dominion, Lucretia, This Corrosion got me hooked straight off. Later on, I grew to enjoy the more vulnerable side of Andrew Eldridge on the piano-backed 1959. All in all, I think this is a well-produced and well-put-together album, and that's why I'm recommending this, Floodland by Sisters of Mercy.
Hi, I'm Markus Kamschulte from Loft Sound Hi-Fi and Recording Studios in Germany, and my favorite album is Nina Hagen. Wow, I love this record. When I heard it, I was 14, and this band is awesome. Pochka on guitar, Monopreka is in heaven right now. I love him, bass player, and Herwig Mitterregger on drums, and Reinhold Heil on keyboard. Awesome keyboard player. I love this band, and then this voice, Nina Hagen, so unique, so expressive, so punky, and everything together. Like opera meets punk and rock, and I love this album. Heard it for 1,000 times, could hear it forever. I got so many records, but this is really one of my favorite albums of all time, and original autograph from her here from a concert 2 years before. Yeah, thanks a lot. Hope you enjoy it.
So another couple of album recommendations there for you. I love the fact that he has Nina Hagen t-shirt on as well, which was great. And for any Elton John fans out there, what a great album to go to your record store and try and pre-order, because I'm pretty sure that officially hasn't been released yet. So if you are going to go to your local record store, pre-order, spread that out on social media with the RSD Fill the Gap hashtag. So look, we're getting pretty near the end now. We have, massively overrun, but that's thanks to all the fantastic guests that we've had on. I hope you've been enjoying the podcast at home. We've still got one more guest to come, where I'm going to talk to hi-fi journalist David Price, and he's going to give a rundown of his top 5 turntables of all time. So that'll be really interesting. Just before we go into that, a final reminder of the competition.
We're in Vegas, baby. Everyone loves to win big, and we're giving you the chance to win a Cyrus OneCast smart amplifier, with built-in phono stage, of course. Now, throughout this stream, you'll be seeing videos from our colleagues in the music and audio industry talking about the albums that are important to them and why. And we'd like to invite you to do exactly the same. Simply record your video at home using your phone and then upload to our Facebook page. We'll be sharing some that we like and posting on our Facebook and YouTube channels, and on April the 30th we'll select an overall winner who will receive a Cyrus OneCast. So if you find yourself with a little bit of time on your hands and you want to share your passion with us and with your friends, then why not get recording? Best of luck.
Introducing the OneCast from Cyrus Audio, the world's first high-quality smart amplifier, perfectly integrated with your music streaming apps and voice assistants. For over 30 years, Cyrus Audio has been widely recognised as a market leader in sound quality. The all-new OneCast offers the amazing listening experience you'd expect from Cyrus Audio, coupled with the convenience of your existing services. Listen to your favourite music, radio and podcasts in any room or several at once with multi-room support. The all-new OneCast from Cyrus Audio. Smart music amplified.
We all consider ourselves very fortunate to work in this amazing industry. Whilst every audio manufacturer has their own approach, their own style of implementation, the overall objective is always the same. It's about bringing you more enjoyment. Now that might mean more accuracy, more concert realism, or just more soul. But it's that pursuit of better audio that drives every single one of us. Now, our next guest is none other than David Price. David is an audio journalist with decades of experience, listening to, testing and evaluating more hi-fi equipment than most of us will experience in a lifetime. And here he is to share some of his highlights on that journey.
So my next guest is David Price, a renowned hi-fi journalist for many years. He's a former editor of Hi-Fi World and he's now editor-in-chief of StereoNet. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Simon.
So we've asked you today in your role as audio expert, to roll back the years and pick out from all of that expanse of time your top 5 turntables. And then we've also asked you to make a choice of an arm, a moving magnet and a more moving coil cartridge, just so as we've got a full set. So I'm really interested to hear what you're going to pick. But I guess we should just point out that obviously everyone has their own view. I mean, top of anything, a top 5 or a top 10 in any category is always potentially divisive, because it's not only what people consider best, it's what they define as best actually meaning in some spaces. So clearly this will be very much your personal viewpoint, but obviously built on a massive database of listening tests that you've done over the years, which is great. So are you going to do these in reverse order, 5 to 1 or 1 to 5?
Yeah, I think reverse is good. I'm not going to do the Tony Blackburn, add straight in at number 5. I can do it in the kind of comedy Radio 1 voice if you want, but maybe let's not go there because it might get too silly. So yeah, the number 5. Firstly, before I do this, I just want to qualify what you were saying. It's absolutely right. So for me, these aren't in my view the best ever turntables, bar nothing. They are my favorite, and they are my favorites because I think they were very important historically, in the great vinyl scheme of things, rather than necessarily being the absolute best ever now. I've been tempted to put some obvious ones in. I love the Riga Planer 3. That's a great budget turntable.
I have one of those.
Yep, me too, absolutely. And also the Lin LP12, like you, I can see you've got one there. You know, I love the Lin as well, and I spent my entire grant check in the sort of mid '80s on my first LP12, and lived on lentils, you know, for an entire term. So I really suffered for that. But yeah, I mean, it's a very subjective thing. But I'm coming up with a list which are interesting, maybe quirky, and I just think they're important and interesting to talk about.
Right.
In at number 5 is the JBE Series 3. Now, this is a bit of a mystery turntable for many. It came out in 1978. The company was John Bryant Electronics, and that was formed in 1976. And it's basically, it used to be called the slate deck, because it's basically a slab of Welsh slate used as a plinth, which is, as you can imagine, quite heavy.
Yeah.
With a strange kind of podule platter, I think it's 5 podules, or 6, and it's got a Technics Matsushita direct drive motor inside it. So it's effectively an SL1200 or something quite close to it, but with a Welsh slate plinth.
Right.
It's a very odd turntable. It sold for just a little bit less than the Lin Sondek in the late 70s. So it was a Lin rival, and I don't think it sounds as good as a Lin, but it certainly had a strong following, and it's a fascinating curio. It's an unusual deck, and it's got a really nice kind of strong, solid sound. It's musical, it's enjoyable, but more than anything, to me, it's sort of reminds us of that great period in turntables in the late 70s when vinyl was still the most important audiophile source.
Yeah.
And everybody was in the fight, you know, to make a great turntable, including, of course, your sort of genetic relations mission. At that time, they were making turntables as well. Everyone was making turntables, and it was a hugely competitive time for vinyl and for vinyl hardware, as well as some great LPs coming out as well. So that's number 5.
Okay, excellent, great choice.
Great. Number 4 is the Technics SL1200 Mark II, and this came out in 1979, 1 year after the JBE.
Yeah.
And I'm deliberately using the Mark II. I'm not using the Mark I, which came out in 72. To me, the Mark II Technics is the sort of iconic DJ deck, the one that we all know today.
Yeah.
And it spent a long period in the hi-fi doldrums. It was very largely overlooked in the UK, but because of the, as it were, the strength and the sort of power of the dealership and distribution and the branding of the British decks, like the Riga 3.
Yeah, I remember it being looked on as very much a sort of second class, you know, Japanese import, not as good as the British stuff.
Yeah.
And yet it seems to have outlived them all, really, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, it was when it stopped, the deck stopped production in 2010, and when I think when it stopped production in 2010, it was the longest running turntable ever. And you know, it's continually running in without stopping. So it's an amazing design. But yeah, it had a lot of snobbery about it. And to be fair, it wasn't really aimed directly at the kind of Riga market or the Lin market. But it had I think, a pretty poor tone arm fitted. But the motor unit was amazing. It was amazing. It still is amazing, even now. It has a quartz lock direct drive motor, a really high torque one, and it has vanishingly low speed drift, and an aluminium subchassis with a bulk mode compound base, which is really resistant to vibration. So you get a very solid sound, and certainly it's remarkable for its bass power. Its grip, bass grip and power is amazing. What I did, as many other people have done, is to take the standard tone arm off, and then get a mounting plate. I got one from Origin Live, and you can fit a Riga RB300 tone arm in it. So you can basically put a modern arm in a classic deck.
Yeah.
And it sounds brilliant with a modern arm. I've even had an SME5 in mine at one point, which is probably a bit of overkill, but it is so much better sounding than anyone expects when it's using a modern tone arm. So to me, that's a great iconic deck. It's an iconic DJ deck. All the civilians, you know, the hi-fi civilians who don't know anything about hi-fi but are slightly interested, you draw them a picture of you know, an SL 1200, they'll go, oh, that's a turntable. You know,
exactly. Yeah, everyone knows it. So have you still got one of these now?
Yes, I have actually. Yeah, I have.
In fact, I was going to ask you at the beginning, how many turntables have you got in your house at the moment?
I've probably got about 40.
40?
Yeah.
And you've got all the ones on your top 5 list. Do you own them all?
No, all but one of them. Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of them are in storage, and I'm not sort of a strange person with no friends who's got a I've got in my room here, I've got 4 turntables out and working, and I use them for reviewing or for you know, for trying different cartridges and tone arms and that kind of thing.
I trust you've got a phono signature, Cyrus phono signature, which obviously has 4 inputs on it.
Of course, you don't even need to say. So it goes without saying. But yeah, so I mean, I've also restored turntables. I do classic features on them, you know, and it's hugely time consuming and, you know, a pain in the neck. But I just love turntables, so you've got the right person.
Fantastic.
For this particular job.
Fantastic. So yeah, we all recognise the technique. So that's at number 4. And what's at number 3?
Okay, number 3 is the Michel Gyro deck. So that's 1981.
Yep.
And it was, I think, a quite important turntable in the great scheme of things, because it was one of the first skeletal or exoskeletal turntables. So, before turntables were like your Lin, they had a plinth which basically covered the sub chassis and the springs and all the gubbins inside. Whereas the gyro deck, of course, has an external sub chassis, and you can see all the bits. It's like a kind of big Meccano kit on it. And it's, I think, along with the Oracle, which was also, you could say, the same type of exoskeletal design, it was one of the very first. It's a very interesting design from that point. I knew John Michel when he was still alive. I knew him from the early 90s. And he told me that the gyro deck design, the chassis of the gyro deck, was inspired by 2001: A Space Odyssey's spaceship design. If you watch that movie, so John did a lot of the props for that movie and for various other Stanley Kubrick films, like Clockwork Orange and various others. I think he even did Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and things. So he was located in Boreham Wood, near Elstree Studios. So he was a props maker and did all that sort of stuff. And so the gyro deck has its central sub chassis is inspired by that particular spaceship. It's got a very striking look. I'm looking over at mine now, which is on the other side of the room, covered in dust. Just about to have an arm transplant, and it has a really good sound. I think it's been progressively updated over the years.
Yeah, we've got one of the later versions actually in the DEM room up at Cyrus. We use that as one of our reference turntables. Yeah, they're really. I didn't realise that it was a 2001 Space Odyssey design there, and every time I walk in the room, I see it, and I hadn't made that connection.
Well, he liked his little things, but the sound of it to me. Firstly, Michel turntables, the gyro deck and the orb, which the orb comes from the gyro.
Yeah.
Wonderfully wide soundstage that I've really heard almost no turntable that soundstage is better. It's so expansive, and it's not maybe the deepest. The SME decks go much deeper. Some of the higher end ones, but. It's got a lovely big soundstage. It's got lovely tonality as well. It's got a really rich, not rich, but neutral and natural tone that sounds quite rich actually compared to an SL 1200. Basically, you can put a bright arm and a bright cartridge on, it will sound bright. You can put a fat, rich sort of arm and cartridge, and it will sound fat and rich. So it's quite tonally neutral. It's for the price, it's still amazingly good value, I think. There are better decks. There are decks at the price that do things slightly better, but its overall mix of performance is really good. It's really special. So that's number 3.
Fantastic. So 2 to go. What have you got?
Right. Okay. This is the only turntable I don't own that I've been talking about so far.
Okay.
And I'm not rich enough, sadly. It's a Kenwood LO7D, and it's 1979. And again, this is what I was going back to saying about the glory days of analog being the late 70s. So the Japanese companies were really pushing very hard to try to establish a kind of technological superiority over the Western companies.
Yeah.
They were using all kinds of very interesting things. They had huge budgets back then because of the huge volume of turntables being sold. Then they had big budgets, and had big research teams and so on. And the LO7D is this amazing sort of odyssey of die-cast aluminium, mahogany, synthetic sort of concrete or resin type concrete. It's got a massive bronze platter, a stainless steel top disc, which is to break up the kind of resonant frequencies of the platter. It's got an extra mass ring that goes on, and a massive record clamp. And it's got a switchable quartz lock direct drive servo that you can change the servo rate, basically. It's incredibly high tech for the day. And it comes with a fitted tone arm, which has a carbon fiber arm tube as well, which was really...
That's amazing, yeah.
Well, to be honest, Sony were doing it another 4 years earlier. So it's even more amazing that Sony were doing it. But it is basically this odyssey of wonderful, amazing, high-tech stuff. It was very expensive at the time. It was I think 3 or 4 times the price of a Lin LP12 when it was on sale. It wasn't reviewed very much in the UK press, basically because it was so expensive.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate to review one. I borrowed one, and I did a lot of comparisons with a number of different turntables, including some modern ones, and it's fantastic, So a real sort of left of center design, and proof that at that time, that golden age of vinyl in the late 70s, there was a big enough world market to sustain some incredibly far out designs. So sound quality is really tight, powerful. It sounds very master tape like, and it's the trouble is it's such a dramatic thing to look at, you almost don't want to listen to it.
Do you know how many they actually made of those? I mean,
I don't know, but I would imagine it would be in the low thousands, maybe.
Yeah.
It wasn't a mainstream thing. There aren't many that come up in the UK. If you want to get one, it's Japan or it's the USA.
Right.
And you'll have to change the power supply or use a transformer because they have different voltages. But I think sometimes they do pop up in Europe, sometimes in Germany. So it's once we're all out of lockdown, you can get in the car and go over the Eurostar to grab one. But it's a very rare thing now.
Fantastic. Okay, that is so it's a real interesting range. I noticed that they're all from a similar era. So is your number 1 again of the same genre, or have you gone for something different?
Again, I've gone for the same era. So there's lots of great turntables I've reviewed, modern turntables. I could have mentioned the Technics SP10R, which I did not so long ago. Which is an incredible turntable, brand new. You can buy it, and it sounds fantastic. And there's all sorts, SMEs and so on, and all sorts. But for me, my most favourite turntable is the Marantz TT1000, and that came out in September 1979, I think. And again, this was one of the rivals to the Kenwood, which I've just mentioned.
Yeah.
It was 4 times the price of a Lin LP12. I think it was 400,000 yen. at that time, it was an absolutely spectacular deck. It has constrained layer damping, which effectively is not. They have that system in speakers where you've got basically a sandwich of materials with a sort of damping.
Resonance,
In this case, they used a 38. They used 15mm glass plates, which sat either side of an 8mm aluminium alloy interlayer. So you've got this incredible plinth, which is 38mm thick, weighs an absolute ton, and is basically aluminium alloy sandwiched between two glass sheets, and hugely substantial. You tap it and the resonance just disappears into the center of the earth. You know, it just goes. And 3.5 kilogram balanced aluminium platter. The early ones had a glass platter mat, which in later ones they removed because it was a very fashionable thing to use glass platter mats back then, but I think we now realize it's probably not ideal. But I own one of these. I bought it from someone one of the very few people who had it, who had a connection with Marantz back in the day, and I got it restored, you know, ever since then I've used it with various arms. It's one of the best sounding turntables I've ever heard. The best time I ever heard it was when it had an Origin Live Enterprise arm with a Lyra Titan I think it was. This is probably about 10 years ago.
Right.
When using that particular combination of arm and cartridge with the deck, and it was just staggering. It's immense soundstage, you know, three-dimensional, vast left to right, incredibly strong bass, incredible dynamics, great speed, attack, but it's still smooth as well. If you take the glass platter off and put something else on, it's quite smooth. But yeah, it's just like an absolute battleship of a turntable. You know, they don't make them like that anymore, as they say. There's really not the market for these kind of decks anymore, because of there's such a kind of niche pursuit. But going back to what we were saying, in the late 70s, there was a market for it, a big worldwide market, and that's why we saw so many amazing decks come out.
Yeah, those times may be coming around. I mean, I think that the vinyl market is still slowly increasing, and the market for turntables is still increasing.
Yep.
So it'd be really interesting to see how that market moves. So that very interesting top five, David. I noticed not a Lin or a Riga in sight, but I guess what you're saying is that these are point in time innovations, which is why you've picked them, which kind of fascinating, really interesting take.
No offense, no offense to Lin or Riga, you know, they're great decks and they're very interesting, and they could easily have been in my top five, but I thought I'd do some interesting and different ones that maybe you know, other people might not do, simply because of the rarity. So but I mean, this is the wonderful thing about turntables. They've all got their own character. You know, like speakers, they're like loudspeakers. They've got their own distinct character, and people latch onto them and love them for certain reasons, I think. And you just can't, you know, put things into words. It's like trying to explain why you like your favorite pair of shoes, kind of thing. Really, it's
Yes, that I understand. Okay, so just wrapping this up then, your favorite tone arm and cartridges. So what would you pick to go with your top turntable?
Okay, well, I'm going to be, again, controversial. I'm not going to go for the obvious choices. I'm going to go for in terms of the favorite tone arm, it's something that will probably have a number of people falling off their bar stools, you know, with shock. So that people will be questioning my sanity, but I really like the SME Series 3. And yes, that's Series 3, not Series 5. I've got one. I've got it in my JBE, and it is by far not the best ever tone arm.
Okay.
It is one of my favorites, certainly. because it comes from a time, again, from 1978, when there was so much going on. There was a big argument going on, as I mentioned before, between direct drive and belt drive. So, you know, a lot of people with very strong opinions about belt drive sounding better than direct drives and vice versa. Another big debate they were having in 1979 was between basically high compliance and low compliance cartridges. So we had the king of the world in 1977-78 was a Shure V15 Mark IV,
yeah,
which was a very high compliance moving magnet cartridge, and it needed a low mass and a tone arm of a low effective mass to work best. Now, at the same time, you were beginning to see a whole new generation of very low compliance moving coil cartridges coming along, which required very high effective mass tone arms to work properly. So the reason what I'm leading up to here is the SME3 came in right at the end of the ultra low mass, low effective mass kind of craze.
Yeah.
Designed really, it came out in 78, but it should have come out in 76 because it would have been more successful, because at that time everyone wanted a really low effective mass tone arm, and the SME5 I think was just 5 gram effective mass, which is vanishingly low. It had nitrogen hardened titanium tubing on its arm tube,
yeah,
arm wand, which is SME said at the time was only twice the diameter of a human hair in terms of its thickness.
Okay.
Incredibly thin walls on the arm tube, which gave it a very, very low mass, but it was also very stiff and very rigid. So from a technological point of view, very interesting design. It won a Design Council Award, I think in 1979, which was a really big deal back then. It has to me, it has a very nice sound. It's not particularly accurate these days, but it's soft and smooth, and it has a very kind of what many people would associate with a kind of iconically vinyl sound. It's just very even, smooth, gentle, slightly rounded bass, slightly soft treble as well. But you give it a good moving magnet cartridge, and it absolutely sings. It's nice and fluid and fun to listen to. So yeah, a lot of people will be going, he's totally mad, he should have said to me 5.
Style over substance.
So, but I think that this was an interesting arm in its time, and you know, it was like a kind of space age tone arm. When it came out, it was like, wow, you know, we've never seen anything like it. So it was a really big deal back in the day.
And the cartridge that you're putting on it is what?
Right. Okay. In my fantasy late 70s turntable arm cartridge combination. It's a cartridge I have actually. It's the Technics EPC Mark 205. Sorry, EPC 205C Mark III.
Right.
Get the anorex.
Classic 1970s naming there.
Yes, it rolls off the tongue so easily. So again, 1979. And it was a moving magnet, obviously designed for exactly to fit hand in glove in a tone arm like the SME Series 3. And to me, it's a very niche cartridge. You know, you could have said at the time, you know, Goldring G900 IGC or Autophon VMS 30E or whatever. But this was a niche, strange Japanese thing. But it had a ruler flat frequency response from 20 hertz to 15 kilohertz. It was only minus 0.5 dB down during that range, and that was amazing for vinyl.
Yeah.
Its total frequency response, I think plus or minus 6 or 10 or whatever dB, it was 5 hertz to 80 kilohertz, you know, which means it's effectively kind of you know, DVD audio almost. So, but it had a boron cantilever with an incredibly low effective moving mass. It was very, very low. It was 1/6 of most cantilevers of that time. So it basically the cartridge could track the groove with incredible speed and delicacy. and it has a very clean and accurate sound, very delicate. It sounds like a really good moving coil, actually, in many ways, despite tracking at 1.25 grams. It was £70 when it was new, which was about 3 times the price of the average kind of cartridge you buy for your, entry level Riga or something, maybe 4 times. So it wasn't crazily expensive, but definitely the geek's choice, I would say, that one.
Okay. And to round it off, then, your favorite moving coil cartridge, so the one that you would swap out. I guess you'd have to swap your arm out as well, though, wouldn't you? In this case,
you wouldn't want to be putting the Supex SD900 Super in an SME3. I know people who've done it, but it's really it's trying to take a sort of Lotus Esprit off-road. Basically, it's not really the right the right gig. So the Supex 900 Super, again, 1979, was, to me, and I owned one, I still own it, I kind of still use it occasionally. It's not the absolute best moving coil cartridge I've ever heard. I'd give that accolade to the Lyra Etna SL, but the SD900 sounds nothing like anything I've ever heard before. It's a very low output, 0.02, I think, of a millivolt. No, 0.2 of a millivolt, and it is it needs a proper, decent phono preamplifier. I'm sure I know someone who makes.
We're not bad at those.
So, but yeah, you need a modern, actually, a good modern sensitive solid state phono preamplifier for it, really, and it struggled at the time because the phono stages of the amps and preamps at that time were just a little bit noisy, the moving coil ones. So that was always the downside, that it was a very low output design. It's also very low compliance, so it needs a really high effective mass arm. Linitok is a very good thing to put it in, or an ECOS or an SME5 maybe. But I always found the ECOS and ITOC absolutely just were magic with this particular cartridge. It's basically a baby Koetsu. It's kind of Koetsu that's shrunk in the wash from the glory days of Koetsu.
Okay.
It has a lovely, rich, creamy sound. It's just so romantic. It's liquid sounding, and it just has a way of, you put on a record, and on any other cartridge I've got, the cartridge just sort of tells you about the soundstage and the music and this and that. But it's almost more like a drug trip with an SD900. It's just, everything is just sort of flowers and sunshine and beauty and happiness, and it's like you've taken a happy pill, basically. It's not very accurate, but it really has a great character, and it's well worth picking one up and getting it retipped if you can.
Fantastic. So your recommendation as a drug alternative is that cartridge. So just to sum up, so your ideal combination then presumably is the Marantz TT1000 turntable with your SME Series 3 arm, and then presumably the Technics moving magnet cartridge on it.
It could be, yeah. It could be. One of them. One of my.
One of your 40 that you have knocking around the house.
Yeah, I mean, I think the SME 3 is just not quite good enough to get the best out of the Marantz, but there's all sorts of things you could put in there, but it's the wonderful thing about vinyl is it's not just turntables. You have to have long pub debates over this one's better than that one. It's not just tone arms, it's not just cartridges, and you could talk for hours or days about cartridges. It's the combinations of the three, and we can all just disappear into a sort of alcoholic cloud of oblivion as we try to explain why this combination is better than that. So yeah, I mean that would be quite a memorable combination, certainly. But I've gone for products which have character. There are other turntables and arms and cartridges which have maybe more analytical, more matter-of-fact sound, but I kind of think if you're into classic vinyl and you're talking all time vinyl rather than what's on the market now, you know, if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, you might as well go for things with big characters, you know, and even if they're a little bit colored or a little bit flawed or a little bit soft in the bass or whatever, you know, that's the fun of classic vinyl. You can get a system that sounds like what most people's idea of vinyl is, you know.
I get it. Yeah.
That, you know, so
Brilliant.
Yeah.
David, it's been fascinating. Real trip down memory lane, most of it, which is great. And yeah, thank you very much for taking the time today to share your choices based on your huge amount of experience with us. Really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers.
My name is John Green. I work for Monitor Audio and Roxanne. You may not know, but Roxanne, Cyrus, we're old friends. I've known Simon and Peter for a long time, and they asked me to contribute, and thank you very much. Here I am. As many of us are, we're working from home at the moment. I'm working from home at the moment, so I've got my little lab set up here. Unfortunately, I'm self-isolating from my vinyl at the moment. I'm separated from it in the current circumstances, but my choice remains the same. It's this album here. Oops, hopefully you can see that. It's Joan Armatrading by Joan Armatrading. Not her first album, as you might have thought from the title. It's actually her third. It's amazing. The production is incredible. The playing is it's just perfection. How did I find it? Well, it was my dad's favourite, so it has a very, very special place in my heart. He had a true love of music, and it was luckily passed down to me. And I absolutely adore this album. I hated it initially because it was my dad's music, but come 15, 16, it found its way up into my record collection, and it's stayed there ever since. And it's amazing. It thoroughly recommended. It's probably her best work in my opinion. Yeah, go and buy it. You won't be disappointed. Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Jeff Wells from Nation Imports in Canada. My album choice for Virtual Record Store Day is Roxy Music's masterpiece album, Avalon. Avalon was the last album the band actually produced together before Brian Ferry went off to his solo career. What I love about this album is the percussion and the drums. They carry this album from beginning to finish, I think. And there's just a delicate addition of guitar and saxophone, keyboards that give it a real sensual feel from beginning to end. Interesting story about this album. The Haitian-born artist Yannick Etienne, who is the female voice on the song Avalon, actually couldn't speak a word of English. And her boyfriend would do her translations in between sessions at the recording studio. Her addition to this song changes everything, and I really think it's one of the best songs on the album. So once again, if you haven't listened to this album in a long time, pull it out, dust it off, put it on. Roxy Music's Avalon. Cheers.
Hello, my name is David Price, and this is my favorite vinyl LP, or it's one of the very many favorite vinyl LPs I've got, along with several other hundred, I should say. As you can probably tell, it is by Japan. You can tell that from the obi, because this is the Japanese version, and it's Quiet Life. It's the band's third LP release. It came out in the UK on the 4th of January 1980 on the Hansa record label. It peaked at a stratospheric number 72 the next month, and it was recorded during 1979 with John Punter at the controls. The band liked working with this guy so much that they stuck with him through the rest of their fairly admittedly short-lived career. But it has a lovely clean sound, I think. What's really nice about it is the kind of late period analog feel to it. By this time in late 79, early 80s, some bands like, for example, Rush were already using digital recordings. But this is analog, and it sounds very much like analog. It's warm, it's sweet, it's big, it's expansive, it's punchy, and it's possibly a little vague and woolly, but actually the better your hi-fi equipment gets, the better your turntable and your cartridge get, then the more you can really kind of get down into the nitty-gritty of the detail of the recording. Musically, I would say it's quite important, possibly more important than many people think. It's almost like a prototypical new romantic or 80s pop rock album. It's got a lot of 80s production, despite being recorded in the late 70s. And that's flangers, phasers, heavy harmonizing on the vocals. There's an E-bow that's used quite extensively through the recording. And David Sylvian changed his voice from a scratchy, punky style to more like a kind of Brian Ferry crooner for this album, for the third album that they did. And it's quite special. The songwriting is beautiful. It's a very atmospheric album. It's quite melodic and great fun. I think you should try it if you possibly can. Thank you.
So everyone, sadly, we have now reached the end. It's been an amazing day, fantastic contribution from all of our guests. I've really enjoyed them. I hope they've had some really interesting tales to tell, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to their stories as well. If you like what we've been doing, then please do give us a thumbs up on the old YouTube. That'll be helpful. And once again, a huge thank you to all our contributors who have helped us turn what started really as a sort of germ of an idea into what has now become, gosh, a 3-hour extravaganza. So yeah, apologies for the massive time overrun. I think over the next few days, the plan is going to be to break this broadcast up into some smaller chunks and post some of those individual interviews and vinyl recommendations on YouTube. There is one final album recommendation to come. At this stage, I'd like to do a quick shout out for my son Alex and his wife Rio, who are both doctors, and as we speak they are manning the NHS front lines in intensive care wards, protecting us all. So stay at home everyone, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Hi there, I'm Simon Freethy, Managing Director at Cyrus, and my choice for my favourite album on vinyl is this one, Pink Floyd's The Wall. Now I can already hear the wave of angst from those die-hard Pink Floyd fans saying, how can you possibly pick that album? Why aren't you choosing Dark Side of the Moon or Animals or Wish You Were Here? Hold your horses and let me plead the case to the defence. Firstly, you're right. Actually, it's not really, in my view, a Pink Floyd album. It's a Roger Waters album. And in fact, as it says on the inside cover, written by Roger Waters with kind of Pink Floyd in assistance. And as such, it is very much in Roger Waters' style. It's moody, it's dark, it's anti-establishment, it's angry. And you know, in some places almost bordering on depressive. You know, it's his classic style. And as a teenager at the height of their anti-establishment angst, it really spoke to me when it first came out. So there's an emotional bond there to start with. The other reason I really like it is the first album that I was aware of that really told a story. We'd had concept albums in the past, but this was the first album that strung together those tracks with little bits of action or narrative between the songs that move the story along. A trick often repeated much later, but kind of this was one of the first albums that really played up to that and implemented it in a fantastic way. And it's those interludes that actually give you the clue to the other reason why this album is so good. They are exceptionally, the whole album is exceptionally well recorded. And, I've had times where I've been listening to this album, and at the beginning of one of my turns where you hear that door slam, I've had people turn around, look at the door, what was that, who came in, because the recording quality is that good. And I think testament to that is that in 2005, there was a collection of very talented musicians who did a tribute album called Back Against the Wall. And even 25 years later, with more modern recording techniques and a whole bunch of talented musicians, that album, whilst very nice and very good, really is just that. It comes over as a tribute album, not as good as the original. And the last bit, the reason I really like this, my favourite piece of the album, is that on the very last track of side 4, there's this harmonium playing piece, which is people sort of troopsing across a World War I battlefield. And it finishes with the words, "This is where," and then you turn over and you put side 1 of the album back on, and you've got exactly the same track, and the words start with "We came in." So it's that link between the last side of the album and the first side, making you want to finish it, and then making you want to get the album out again, go back to side 1 and listen to it all over again. Really neat trick, really like that. Lots of really clever things in the album. So that's my choice for my favourite vinyl, Pink Floyd, The Wall.